Hey guys, welcome back to Revolution tonight. We're going to look at TurritinFan's video on unicorns. And so TurritinFan has made quite a few videos in the past few weeks. And I did listen to his other previous video where he has comments of me in the debate and things like that. But I think that this latest one seems to be a little bit more comprehensive, where he's written an article on his website and he's going through a bunch of information there. And so we want to examine these claims. And so if you're sort of new to this and you're my video, I had a debate the other day with TurritinFan. And so TurritinFan was saying that there are errors in the King James and the word unicorn is an error. And so I was debating and saying that the word unicorn is a perfectly fine word to have in the Bible for the 1611 translation. Now, the word unicorn might have dropped out of a particular type of usage. It's become predominantly scientific, say like this rhinoceros here that you're looking at is called the Rhinoceros unicornus. It's the Indian rhinoceros. So it's become mostly a scientific definition to say unicorn or unicornus. But TurritinFan is saying that unicorn, it just conjures up the horse with the horn. And I understand that because I don't think any King James person, King James defender, King James only, TR only, whatever you want to label us, I don't think that anyone really denies that a 400-year-old book is going to have 400-year-old definitions in it. And so some of the definitions are old. We understand that the word in James talking about gay clothing, it's not talking about going to the Mardi Gras or anything like that. This word unicorn, we're going to look at that in the Oxford English Dictionary. We're going to look at it in many other places. And so fortunately, TurritinFan seems to be going over the same material that I've shown or looked at, but it seems that he's just basically just saying that it's impossible for it to be a rhinoceros or a type of rhinoceros or something like that. It has to be a bull or a cow or a auroch or a wild ox or something like that. And so I guess it's pretty hard to explain everything without going through the video. So come with me on this journey. Now, this video goes for 3 hours and 21 minutes. And it's not the sort of video where you can just skim through bits of information all the way through. There's claims that, rhinoceros doesn't mean unicorn. A unicorn isn't an umbrella term. These are the type of terminologies that I use in the debate. And so we sort of have to go through everything. And so I'm going to run it on 1.25. But it's going to be probably a 3 or 4 part set of videos. But I really want to nail this down. And I guess in the meanwhile, if you're watching this and you're in agreement with me, if you want to do studies on this and send me information, what does this Bible say? What does this reading say in the Luther Bible? What does it say in the Italian Bible? What does it say in the Spanish Bible? What do other Bibles say about it? What about other definitions? Because that really helps as well. And instead of I know some people listen to this on the run, and that's fine. I do that quite a lot myself. And so sometimes it's hard to stop and, write down things or send in a little text. Sometimes I just let people know that I'm watching. It's like I'm watching or listening from somewhere. But especially if it goes for 3.5 hours, it's pretty hard to sit through all that and watch everything and read everything. But that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go through every little thing that TurritinFan says, because I believe I'm correct here. And of course, as we go along, when you do an in-depth deep dive like this, you learn things, you grow, and you nuance certain things that you have said in a certain way. And so as I was going through this, I realized that sometimes I was saying the rhinoceros, with the horn and things like that, or it makes quite a big difference to a lot of people about where this horn is coming from, whether it's from the forehead or whether it's from the nose area and things like that, which can get into sort of grey areas. Also, TurritinFan's looking at quotes from Shakespeare and quotes from other people in England. So we're going to go through all of these. We're going to read through the source documentation that he provides, and we're going to see if what he's saying is true. We will surrender our claim that the King James has no error. One of the things is, to me, in all honesty, this is no dig against TurritinFan, because he wanted to debate and put up these things. For me, to debate Easter is probably one of the easiest things I can do. Revelation 16:5, probably even the Comma Johanneum. These, I've debated these before, all of these issues. When it comes to unicorns, usually this is brought up by people, but it's usually quickly resolved just by looking at, say, the Oxford English Dictionary, or just looking at the usage in history. You just sort of like, well, everyone else over the years has thought of this as a one-horned animal. So to me, it's always been a bit of a sort of like a no-brainer. It's like, well, it's obviously a unicorn, or it's a type of rhinoceros, and but TurritinFan's going to the mat on this. He wants a challenge. He sort of said in his video that he would prefer not to really do a whole debate on this, but perhaps like a back and forward video session, debate session sort of thing. So I'll do that. That's fine. And we'll have a look at this. And as we're going, I'll be updating my website, any new information I put in there. I'll be throwing it on there. But I think what we'll do, I'll check the sound first. Now, I just had a huge big banana smoothie, which was really good because it was quite hot here today in Australia. And so I'm wearing headphones which can pick up every tiny little swallow or burp, or it's quite embarrassing sometimes when you're in a debate and you quickly mute yourself, and you like and you do a little bit of a pretend you're coughing, but you're actually, because you're sitting there for 3 hours, you make funny noises sometimes. And so please excuse me if I gargle a little bit. I've got my nice cool water here. It's cooling down. It's a nice evening here. It's about 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday night. And I'm going to check this sound. So let's go through this. No sound. Or is it low sound? Or is it low sound? And so I think this is probably the only problem. See, obviously TurritinFan's using StreamYard as well, because he's got exactly the same type of thing set up, which is probably the best one to use. You can use StreamYard for free, but it just has a little logo there. I'd probably recommend that people just do that. I got the whole package, which I was intending on having lots of guests and all that, but I found that was quite frustrating, because you just didn't know who was going to come on. And so you'd be sitting there and someone would come on and they'd ask you a whole heap of questions about something you're not really, the show wasn't on, and it's like it would sort of throw a bit of a spanner in the works. But I think for doing debates and things like that, it's definitely the best thing, and just for doing this type of stuff. But strangely, the screen doesn't seem to work each time. I do the same thing each time. I put the video up there, and log it in like that, but it doesn't seem to work. Now let's just check this one again.
Good, and I'm going to adjust the Facebook comments so that people can comment live if they would like to. Now that that's out of the way, I am off to the races. Okay. Metaphorically speaking,
it's just amazing. Here he is doing.
We are talking today about.
It's quite annoying. I guess that's one of the faults of StreamYard. StreamYard really have to pick up their game there. Okay, so some of these videos get quite a lot of hits, and like a lot of people watching live now. At the moment, we've only just got a couple of people watching. But we can get up to 20 people. It shows me a little thing of how many people are watching. And I think that's watching on YouTube. So I do share this on Facebook and also on Twitter. But I share it through my YouTube because that's better for the algorithm, I think. Because rather than having 50 people watch it on Facebook, they actually watch it through Facebook but on YouTube. And so then it counts as a hit on YouTube as well. So anyway, without further ado, let's let TurritinFan chat.
The subject of unicorns. And this subject comes up not because of the English Standard Version or the Legacy Standard Bible or any other recent translation, but because of an extremely popular translation of Scripture, the King James Version. It is deservedly one of the most popular translations, even to this day, not only beloved by many Christians, but also by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka the Mormon Church. They also love this particular translation. They use it, but it is full of mistakes. Not huge mistakes. And when I say full, I mean throughout. You can find them in all different parts. But as the King James translators themselves recognized, there's parts of Scripture that are plain and clear to everyone, and there's parts that are not so plain, not so clear. And one of those parts related to an animal known in the Hebrew Old Testament as the Reem.
Okay, so where the King James translators talked about that they might find a few places where they were a little bit uncertain about things was when there was a phenomenon called hapax legomenon. So hapax legomenon is when a word appears only once. And so obviously if it just mentions like a turtle or something like that, or sometimes it's a Berg because we have turtle dove and things like that. So we got to understand English, we got to understand Hebrew, looking at all different translations. And the thing is too, they've given us their best estimate, and they're just saying, look, this is the best that we can do. If anyone comes up with something better, we can probably go with that. But we've sort of struggled a little bit with some of these words where there's only one appearance of them. So that does not apply to unicorns here, because this word reem in the Hebrew appears 9 times. So this is not something without. So I'll get this comment up because this seems to be a theme. And so oftentimes when I'm looking at critical text, people talking about certain things, oftentimes they have a theology or a methodology or a preconceived idea or about a certain thing, and they're running with it. So I want to sort of expose that as we go along. And so let's just have a look at, say, the preface to the reader. And Christian Publishing House has a preface to the reader. Let's check this one out. Okay, so we're looking at, say, the word stones. Okay, here we go, straight away. I'll make this nice and big for you because I understand it can be hard to read. Let's get that back up there. Okay, so it says, there be many words in Scripture which be never found there but once, so that we cannot be helped by conference of places. But here with unicorn, we can be helped by conference of places. Again, there be many rare names of certain birds, beasts, and precious stones, etc. Now, in such a case, doth not a margin do well to admonish the reader to seek further, and not to conclude or dogmatize upon this or that peremptorily. And so this is very clear that we're talking about a apex legomenon. And then it says again, talking about these type of things, if there is a little bit of, people are not sure what you're actually talking about, to have a marginal note when someone's studying these things out to guide you, that's fine as well. So these two things can be conflated. The fact that they're saying, sometimes they went to the Hebrew. Now, I'm hoping this is not an updated. It does look like an updated edition of, because I know Christian Publishing House, I'm pretty sure that's Andrews, who's part of the new American Standard Version. Yeah, he's got all these. Yeah, Edward Andrews. So I'm just not sure if this is a translation. But anyway, I think you get the point. There's no point finding a new one of that. But I think you get the point that we need to be careful that we're not saying unicorn is just a place where it appears once and we can't find any other references to this, or it doesn't, in the description and in the context, we can't figure out what this is. This is quite clear. And they have put it in the margin, or rhinoceros, which is the exact equivalent to rhinoceros, in the margin in Isaiah chapter 34, I think it's verse 11. And so they've very clearly put that in there. So TurritinFan's going to go through all these things, but I just thought from the outset that we would clear that up, that sometimes you can be getting this image that, they didn't really know what it was. And I know Timothy Berg loves this type of field where wherever you're dealing with the marginal note, it's just sort of a place where the translators sort of glaze over and look at each other and go, I don't know, what do you think? It's like, I don't know, put rhinoceros there. I don't know, put unicorn there. Just put anything there, sort of thing. And they're just bumbling around. And this is the type of thing that's been made out when I did my video series on marginal notes, which Timothy Berg did an article on. And so I think sometimes critical text people can have this mindset that that's what marginal notes are. See, some of the marginal notes are there because of previous Bible versions. And so obviously there's a whole bunch of English Bible versions that went before, a whole bunch of TR editions. There was even the Dwayne or the Reem's. Reem's Bible came out in 1610, but it was the Dwayne version that came out in 1582, I'm pretty sure it was. And so that one had, it's got marginal notes in it as well. Even the whole concept of the unicorn having, the horn of a unicorn having magical properties and related to Christianity. Some people would say that this horned horse would go down to poisoned water and make the sign of a cross, and it would clear up all the poison and all this sort of rubbish. And so the Council of Trent actually put a ban on this type of thing, on relating this type of mysticism to Christianity. And so there was a lot of discussion about what this animal was, but understanding that English was still only getting on its feet. It wasn't an established language like Latin. It wasn't an established language like Greek, probably 50, 60 years beforehand. Now, it was becoming more and more established. The morphology and syntax of English was becoming more and more standardized. And the King James was basically the thing that standardized everything. So it was like this huge work was using all the latest and greatest understanding of English grammar. And so they put it into the Bible, and that just became the standard for quite a long time of how people would talk of, people would point to the Bible and say, well, this has got, this type of wording in it, this having an unicorn, which sounds strange to us. We would say a unicorn, having those type of properties, where later on English morphed and became quite different. Anyway, let's let Turritin talk before I just start rambling on and preaching.
Probably butchering that pronunciation, so my apologies to those who actually know how.
Now, I will maybe fluctuate between 1.25 and 1.5, just so you know. So if he's sort of talking and it's getting a little bit waffly, I'll just sort of try and skip over it as much as I can.
How to pronounce biblical Hebrew. I'm obviously not one of them, not pretending to be. However, I would like to engage this interesting and exciting topic. So in order to make this more user-friendly, as you can see right now, my blog's a kind of tiny note to the side. I'm going to swap things around and make it the main view and put myself to the side, and hopefully that will make this more engaging, more interesting. Algo says, greetings, TurritinFan, greetings, Algo. Good to hear you and see you on here. I know some people are burnt out on the subject of unicorns. I expect this will be my last substantial video on this topic, although I will probably invite Nick Sayers, who has probably done more work on the topic than anyone else on the King James side, or Will Kinney, who also has done a lot on that King James side. Author and I say that I haven't read it because the link that I have to it is broken. So if any of those gentlemen or ladies, I don't know who's the third author, not an insult to Nick or Will, both of whom are gentlemen indeed. If any of them would like to debate this, or someone else would like to debate it, I'm open to such a debate. I don't think it's necessarily the most pressing thing the church needs to deal with, but I'm starting to realize that this may be a useful touchstone of how far someone's willing to go to try to defend the King James Version because of the weight of the argument that the King James Version translators just got it wrong. And they did. This is an example of a mistake that they made. I didn't take it.
And so this is like TurritinFan is coming to this just saying they absolutely made a mistake. There's no doubt in his mind. But the thing is, and he admits this, that he's not really giving us an alternative. So it's a bit like if you were doing a mathematical equation, I said, no, that's wrong. It's either, the answer is either 62, 12, 1,509, or 7. Or it mightn't be any of them, might be something else. You just look at me like, haven't you got the correct answer? So this is the problem, especially with critical text people. They oftentimes are not offering a real solution. And so, say with James White, he talks about Revelation chapter 15, verse 3. I think it has King of the Nations or King of the Saints, and there's some other reading. And so he says the reading of the TR is wrong there, but he doesn't tell you which other reading is correct. He's just he's vague about that. It's just the TR is wrong, and we know that. And I think people have just defaulted to a presupposition that the King James has errors. And so it's almost like if you admit that it's good and that it doesn't have errors, you're in a cult, and so you better not do that. And it's just become this mindset within Christians that, well, pick your error. So say someone like Mark Ward, he's like, well, I've only ever pointed out one translational error, and that's in Job 17:6, where it says that beforehand I was as a tabaret, or aforetime I was as a tabaret in the King James, where it should say, I am one in whom's face men spit, because it sounds like tp, tp. And so that's his example of a mistake, because it sounds like spit, tp. And so it must be spit, of course. And so we throw out everything else and we just go, well, Mark's right. But so the thing is, if we do the homework and prove to Mark Ward that he's wrong there, he will go, oh, I can't find an error. Then he becomes a textual absolutist. He becomes a King James onlyist, apparently, in a cult. It's just so strange. And I think you can get documents in history that have no errors in them. You can do this. I understand most of the time we're looking at manuscripts. Many of these have errors, but sometimes you can go through 3, 4, 5 chapters and there's no error. You can go through a manuscript and read a manuscript and the Textus Receptus and go, they're identical. In Matthew chapter 1, you go Matthew chapter 2. Oh, Matthew chapter 3, there's this one little tiny little change here. Matthew 4, it's got this one little bit. But it's like you can do that with like a whole entire chapter. You can see, I think the thing is we're often looking at manuscripts, and everyone on every side admits that there are errors within manuscripts, what we would call variants. Just like in any printed book, there are print errors. And so of especially of that era. But there were times when things were done perfectly. There are translations out there that are done perfectly, especially if you're working for someone who is important. if you were, say, back in those days, if you were like one of the main translators for, say, the Pope or Philip of Spain, or you would do things accurately. You would think about these things and you would run it by people. And to say that these 60 guys, see, oftentimes people have this mindset that these translators are like translators today. You've probably seen that thing where they're sitting around working out whether slavery should be in the Bible, how should we translate doulos, and they're sort of having a vote and all this sort of stuff. Well, the King James translators, they didn't do it haphazardly like that. They came to this topic very learned. They came to the table with other people who were, most of them, polyglots. Most of these people knew theology very well, and most of these people were probably already in agreement about what words should be where. And so they're tidying up older English Bibles, but they're going through the Textus Receptus. They're looking at the Latin that Theodore Beza has, and they're pretty much all in agreement with what the Word of God says. They're just trying to put this into English. And so when you've got the cross-referencing system that the King James translators used, see, oftentimes people say, why not just go with the Geneva Bible? It's like, well, the Geneva Bible was done in a time of duress by expats from England on the run from Bloody Mary. And so that there was a lot of stress there. The Bishop's Bible was done by a handful of people. And so people who just throw these things out there, I don't think they actually realize the translational process, the superior translational process of the King James translators. They were in a league of their own in the way that they did things. And so this cross-referencing system, I think if any translation of any work of literature was translated like this, you would find that it would be error-free. And so, but this is really quite an amazing thing, because we're looking at, is this a wild ox or an auroch? Or, sometimes you're going through the Bible and it has a little footnote. It's talking about a behemoth or something, and it's like, this is a hippopotamus. And it's just talked about its tail is like a cedar log. It's like, I don't know, it doesn't fit with a hippopotamus. Sometimes you're just left scratching your head at these modern versions. And like I said, in many of my other videos, you wouldn't go on safari with the New King James translator, or you wouldn't go on safari with any of these new modern translators. They'd just be like, that's a type of horse. It's a zebra. But could be a cow, could be they're just sort of very vague about what they're choosing. Is it an auroch or a wild ox, or is it a type of antelope, or what is it? What is this thing? And so let's just continue.
This far in the debate that I recently had, but having spent more time on the subject and having investigated it deeper, I would actually take it farther than I took it during the debate. During the debate, I said...
Okay, so he did mention KJV Today, so he said the site was down. If you just go to kjvtoday.net, don't go to .com. That's been basically co-opted, and it shows these articles, but then it has a whole bunch of rubbish at the bottom of it, so it's used for clickbait, and someone in Romania has stolen that. Not stolen it, but when someone's credit card lapsed, they quickly snabbled it up, and so it's quite a dishonest way of doing business. But anyway, so kjvtoday.net has been made, so this is the newer site. So unicorns or wild oxen in Numbers 23:22 et al. God brought them out of Egypt. He hath, as it were, the strength of a unicorn. Numbers 23:22, King James Version. The King James Version has been criticized for mentioning creatures that are supposedly mythical. Unicorns are one of them. However, unicorns are not mythical creatures. They are called Rhinoceros unicornus, Indian rhinoceros, and each one of them has one horn on its head. A unicorn simply means one horn. The KJV margin for unicorns in Isaiah 34:7 reads, or rhinoceros. It actually says rhinocerots, but that's fine. It's the same deal. So the King James translators were not foolish as to think of a unicorn as a mythical horse with a magical horn. And so I thought I'd read this before we get into Turretin's material, because he does basically say that it's impossible for it to be even a rhinoceros. So it's like, okay. So we see this is a image by Albrecht Dürer, 1515. So if you just go to Wikipedia, Indian rhinoceros, they have this picture there. And actually I had this up before. So it actually has here India Pracht Einschlold. And so I can't really read that. It's very difficult, but it looks like a rhinoceros there. There's a few places where it looks like it says, yeah, here, rhinoceros there. And so, yeah, clearly it has rhinoceros here as well. So that's in 1550. So this is, I guess, in probably a German zoo, or people bringing animals around in that era. And so that's what they thought a rhinoceros was, okay, of that era. Okay, so some critics point to Deuteronomy 33:17 and assert that the KJV erroneously translates a singular noun into the plural by translating Reem as unicorns. So this is a mindset that's throughout this whole video, okay. These critics allege that the KJV translators fudged the numbers of the unicorns from singular to plural in order to accommodate the fact that horns in the plural are mentioned. A unicorn should only have one horn. These critics do not understand that the generalizing use of the singular noun, in which case a singular noun could give the sense of the plural. There are examples of this in Isaiah 11:7. This is another passage in the Bible that mentions animals in the singular. The Hebrew has a singular cow, bear, lion, and ox. This is the familiar passage that say, and the cow and the bear shall feed, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. Notice the singular nouns. However, the NCV says cows and bears will eat together in peace. Lions will eat hay as oxen do. The CEV, cows and bears will share the same pasture. Lions and oxen will eat straw. Notice the plural nouns of lions and oxen. The NCV and the CEV are not literal translations. However, they're translations of the singular nouns in Isaiah 11:7 properly convey the correct sense that pluralities are implied. Anybody can see that when the KJV says the lion shall eat straw, the passage is not speaking of a single lion, but of the entire species, which consists of not one lion, but many lions. Thus, when the KJV translates the singular reem as plural unicorns in Deuteronomy chapter 33:17, it is neither wrong nor dishonest. The reem in Deuteronomy 33:17 is clearly a generic reference to the species and not to any specific single creature. If the KJV translators identified this creature as the one-horned Indian rhinoceros, then they were justified in translating reem in the plural so that the readers would not mistakenly think that a single Indian rhinoceros has more than one horn. And so this is something that I feel TurritinFan failed to really recognize. He just kept saying, oh, it's in the plural, they've mistranslated it. And so this is one of the things where, I mean, when you accuse someone of this type of caliber, like say if I was to read an article on something written by David Crystal, for example. Now, David Crystal, as I mentioned in the debate, he went through my first Easter article and said it was good, and he gave me a few pointers. And if he brought out an article, I wouldn't immediately assume, or if he did a translation of something, I wouldn't immediately assume he's in error, because he is a world-class scholar, okay? Now, I know within the academy, world-class scholars like Bart Ehrman, we were just pointing out recently that when he brings out things on Facebook that say, is Mary really a virgin or something like that? Yeah, he's just always using controversial things. But most of the time it has horrible grammar in it and has typos and spelling errors. And so people are mocking this and laughing at it, and many times he'll change it. But it's not that type of sloppy scholarship that sometimes we see in the academy. Many times when we look in the academy, we see, the anecdotes of Erasmus, Erasmus. It's just sort of like, okay, we're going to do a talk on Erasmus and on the Textus Receptus. So what I want everyone to do is just take the Three Stooges home, study them, and we want to amalgamate the story of Erasmus with the Three Stooges, okay? So just, he was rushing to print, falling over himself and spilling ink all over the place. And, the Complutensian polyglot was already done, and they could have just put that out at any time, but they couldn't really, because if you know about the Complutensian polyglot, it wasn't a race against that, because the dictionaries and things like that of the Old Testament were already at the back of the New Testament that they'd already done. So they had to bring them out at the same time. And so a quick rush, we've got to get it done. 1516 is a deadline date, sort of thing. And, just all these anecdotes and the rash wage. I'll put the comma in if anyone can show it, and all this type of nonsense. We just see that the scholarship of the academy is really quite poor when you examine it. Like, say, Revelation 16:5 and James White. Like, when I went through that, I was shocked. I was like, James White didn't get anything right. Is there anything that he said that made sense in his book? And what I'm finding is the more I go through his material, I'm like, that's not only wrong, but completely wrong. Like, did he even know the argumentation for or against it? Has he bothered to even read King James only, TR only, whatever you want to label it, material? Has he looked at the contra argumentation, or is he just saying this is how it is? And so sometimes people can default to that these guys are buffoons, and for me, I used to do that before I was informed. Sorry, just cut out there. I was like, Easter is a pagan festival. Easter is this, Easter is that. And I had to learn. I had to study. I had to grow out of those things. Now I've come to the stage 20 years later where I'm like, I default to the fact that these guys are correct, because I've been corrected so many times just in my own studies. I'm just there going, man, these guys knew what they were doing. They weren't buffoons. And I think the academy teaches people to default to, the TR has errors, the King James has errors, marginal notes are alternative readings, and the translators just every now and then just absolutely just got the wrong. Yeah, they're like the guys in Star Wars, the stormtroopers trying to shoot. They just can never hit their target. And that's the thing. And if you admit that, then you're a good scholar. If you don't admit that, you're an onlyist. And this is the thing. People think that you take, you believe that the King James is without error because you've just made your decision. Now, I've made this decision because I've done the homework. I've looked at these things. Like my article on unicorns, it's been there for nearly, 13, 14 years. And so this is stuff I've looked at. And the problem is a lot of the time too, and I was explaining this to Chris Yetzer, because he was saying, why do we have to, because I was saying this year I want to focus on a few things. And he said, well, I'm pretty convinced that Job 17:6 isn't spit. That sounds really stupid. I said, look, you might understand that, Chris. I might understand that. And from our perspective, we've done our homework on it and we're convinced. We've convinced ourselves, but it's a whole nother thing to convince the laity, people who aren't going to do the study on it, who just watch a video or who just, skip through an article or just, someone just tells them. And so that's one of the reasons why I do these videos like this. It's so we can sort of look at absolutely everything and then condense it down into argumentation that can be just something that's said in passing in a debate, or something that's, a post on Facebook, and people go, oh, yeah, that's correct. And just coming against the common misconceptions. And there's so many. I mean, I read even just the general chit chat in the debate feed, the live feed, and also comments and things like that. Oftentimes it's quite ridiculous, some of the things that come up. But so yeah, I thought I'd read through that article, because that is an article TurritinFan is saying he couldn't read, or he couldn't get it up because of the old URL. And I understand that, but I think if he had read this beforehand, he might have changed his tune a little bit to make those type of arguments. The King James just haphazardly pluralized this when they didn't have to. And the whole time I was listening to him, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that this is just talking about the general unicorn at large. It's like talking about bears in general, not a specific bear. So okay, so I can shut that one down, and let's let TurritinFan continue.
That I thought at a minimum, the King James translation is misleading, because if what they mean is rhinoceroses or something else, using the word unicorn is problematic. Without further ado, though, let me jump into the actual meat of.
So he thinks the unicorn is misleading. So, and one of the things too, and I asked in the debate, it's like, so do you think it's wrong because unicorn has changed, like the word gay has changed, in other words? Or do you think the 1611 guys got it wrong? Back in their day, they were all just looking at each other going, I don't know. And they just, went with a consensus sort of thing or whatever. Now, TurritinFan seems to have come to both positions. And so he's saying, well, it's not only misleading to have it now because it conjures up the picture of a horse with a horn in its head, but the King James translators didn't know what they were doing. And so he's saying both now. And so this is quite interesting, because I would have sort of agreed if he was just like, yeah, well, nowadays the definitions changed. It's like, yeah, 400-year-old book with 400-year-old definitions in it. There's bound to be a few words and an animal that's changed here and there. And sometimes when it says the turtle, it's talking about the turtle dove, so it was not a turtle, and so unless you know those things, it can seem a little bit strange. And so that's fine. I would agree with that. But when he's saying the King James translators have made they've tried their best, but they failed, or they misleadingly put this in because of some reason. I think most of the time TurritinFan is saying they just failed. They didn't do a good job here. So, which is quite amazing to me. I mean, of all the places to pick an error, I mean, you have all the English Bibles saying unicorn here. Now, he looks at the Douay Reams. We'll go through that. But all the, basically Protestant English Bibles, they all have unicorn in every reading. So you have to say all them are wrong too. Okay. Then they have the marginal reading of rhinoceros. And it's like, no, that's misleading as well. And so we'll go into what TurritinFan thinks of that. And one of the reasons why I sort of have to go through this video, because some of the thoughts fluctuate in and out. So sometimes TurritinFan's going with a certain thing, but I think he actually corrects himself halfway through. And that's fine. I'll probably do the same. But let's just continue.
Of my blog post. And you can find this blog post on my blog. The link is in the notes on YouTube, probably other places as well. As you can see, I've illustrated it. Let me see if I can make the zoom a little bit bigger. I think I can. There we go. So, in fact, we don't really even need me at all. I don't know. So it's kind of nice to see that I'm alive at the bottom. In any event, the unicorn, or should it be wild ox, aurochs, or the like? And I say wild ox, aurochs, the like. And I know right away, folks like Will Kenny are not going to be happy with this. I'm not getting a definitive, no, it's not unicorn, it is wild ox. And I'm telling you it's wild ox, and it has to be wild ox, and it's this specific species, and it has this scientific name, and so forth. And no, the answer is some kind of wild bull-like creature. Wild ox is an example, aurochs is an example. These are examples of the relevant kind of animal it may be. But as far as knowing exactly which species or something like that, no, we don't have that level of detail. And I don't know if we'll ever be able to have that level of detail, although who knows? There could be ongoing research in this field. There could be things that I'm unaware of so far. I haven't been studying this for years. I was sparked to research this farther because of the fact that although it's one of the go-to examples of places where the King James translation certainly doesn't capture the accurate meaning today, I had mistakenly thought that perhaps it accurately conveyed the sense long ago, or at least accurately enough conveyed it long ago. But I'm not convinced of that anymore. And I'm ready to, as the saying goes, throw the translators under the bus on this one. Not that they should have known better, but that they could have translated it better, even at the time. There was a better word they could have used. And that if they had used the better word, they had wild ox. They used that to translate a different Hebrew word in the Old Testament, talking about the clean animals. And they could have used that same phrase here. But let's jump in. What did the King James Version translators mean by unicorn? Now, this was...
Okay, so, yeah, like I was saying before, it's quite amazing. I'm not sure. Do I become muted? No, I don't. That's cool. I find it quite amazing that all of the English versions say unicorn, okay? And the King James has it as well. But then the whole of the Latin evidence, they use unicorn and rhinoceros or rhinocerots or, a similar type of term all the way through. And they use these as synonymously. And then in the Septuagint, it's monoceros. And they're all to do with single-horned creatures. So it's like pretty much the whole of history, including the King James. And then you've got people later on saying, no, it's a two-horned animal. It's, no, they were thinking of this horse creature with a horn in the middle of its head and this mythical creature. And so it's just quite amazing to me, this leap over all of that history. And I understand that sometimes the King James can be at loggerheads against the Septuagint or against the Vulgate, and but the thing is, it's almost like this is a place where it's like, okay, there's just absolutely general agreement between the whole lot of it. So you're going to have a pretty good case to come against this, because you're coming against all the Latin, all the Septuagintal Greek, which these guys many times the critical text guys uphold as like something that can actually usurp the Hebrew. Many times they're like, well, the Septuagint says this, and so let's go with it. And New King James has many readings from the Septuagint and others, and so, but yeah, and the whole Vulgate. But then all the English, it just seems so strange to just say, well, the King James guys could have used wild ox there, but they didn't. When it's like, okay, well, what about the Bishops guys? What about the Geneva guys? What about, Coverdale and the Matthews Bible and Tyndale and Wycliffe? And when you go all the way back, it's unicorn all the way back. And unicorn usually means a one-horned animal. So anyway, I just find it quite remarkable. To me, this is like if you're looking for evidence, it's like looking at, say, the last 12 verses of Mark and going, well, there's two manuscripts that don't do it, but there is, 1,637 that have the reading. Should we just throw all that out? You know what I mean? And it's like, it's not even half the time not even looked at. It's just, it just sort of boggles the mind that many times critical text guys are coming against TR people on a TR minority reading. So most of the time it's a critical text that has minority readings, but every now and then a TR reading can be in a minority. And so we don't say that we're just majority text. Some people say that, but the TR used to be called the majority text. That's where the problem comes in. But in the 1980s, someone printed a majority text, and so people get those conflated. But sometimes, like Ephesians 3:9, it can be like, okay, well, we are in the minority there. And we're, defending that reading, and people like TurritinFan are just like shaking their heads saying, you got this reading. But I could show him 300 readings with about that much evidence for what he's got in many places in the critical text. But when you're looking at something like this, it's almost like we're like, almost all of history is on our side. It's like, I just they jump from TR bad, TR minority reading really bad, all this sort of stuff. But then look at this, he's going against the majority. He's going against the Vulgate. He's going against the Septuagint. Usually they're going with them, and so I just find it's quite strange. So we got Rick Friars here says the sheep are the unseen words become the shepherd, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another as a shepherd divided his sheep from the goats. Okay. Yeah, I'm not really sure, Rick Fries, what that's got to do with here, but that's fine. You can post whatever you want. Let's just continue with the video.
This is a topic that does come up from time to time for a variety of reasons. People want to defend the Bible, as we should. The Bible is inspired, it's infallible, it's inerrant. And Reem is a real animal that really existed. The Bible is not making...
So the Bible is infallible. It is inerrant. It is... he said three things there, and I'm like a goldfish. I've just forgotten them. But, I mean, at the end of the day, he doesn't know what this is. Okay, so when we say what we believe every word of Scripture, all Scripture is given by inspiration of God, we're talking about even these little bits here too. Now, if we're just talking about the Hebrew, I mean, we got no problem. Everyone would see Reem, and it's like, okay. But it does matter how that's defined. If you define, the name of Jesus as Judas, and you're saying, well, or it's Zeus or something, I mean, obviously there's going to be a problem there. Now, obviously this is talking about an animal in the Bible, so it's not as, theologically important as something talking about salvation or whatever. But we believe every word is accurate and every word is important, and that every word can be proven to be accurate. Now, TurritinFan sort of saying, perhaps in the future we can figure out what this is. I don't think that God made the Bible that vague. I think part of preservation is also when Jesus says, this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations, and then the end shall come. To me, that is a clear sign that all nations are going to get, they're going to get the gospel. They're going to be able to translate into their language what the Hebrew is, what the Greek is, and they're going to be able to understand it. If they can't get these basic things right about animals and things like this, I just find that what else is wrong? You just left there going, well, what else is wrong? What else can't they figure out? That was one of the things I pointed out with my debate with Rob Rowe. He was talking about how great, what's his name? Michael Heiser. That Michael Heiser was, the go-to guy. And I said, Michael Heiser believes that the name of God is Yahweh, which is actually Jupiter. It's Yahweh Pitta. Now, to believe that God is Jupiter, the God of the Bible, and to pronounce it at Yahweh exactly the same pronunciation as they pronounce Jupiter, Yahweh Pitta. But to me, it's like if you can't just figure out the most basic thing like the name of God, what chance has he got of explaining in depth other Hebrew words and all the rest of it? Now we're going to go through some of the Hebrew, some of the Greek. We're going to go through pretty much everything that we possibly can that TurritinFan brings up and other things that I found. And we're going to look at this, but most of the time with this, it's not even all this involves is just most people can just look at the Oxford English Dictionary and they're like, where I think there is, I think there just has to be a bias against the King James to come up with this type of mentality that this is an error. I just can't see any other way around it. I can't see, like when I've gone through all of TurritinFan's material, I'm not left there going, oh yeah, he's got a good point there. I'm left there going, can't he see that he's squeezing all this information just to suit him, just to suit his methodology of saying that the King James translators are in error. And he's just reading this into a lot of these quotations. And like I just read about from the KJV Today website, when we go through that, clearly it's talking about the unicorn as a species, not talking about a singular unicorn there, or the plural horns and all this sort of stuff. So this is just some very basic things that to overlook this type of material just makes me wonder. It's like, well, I'm just not in all the way along. I was just not in agreement with anything that was really said, and it was, I guess, a little bit disheartening, because you sort of hope that people, especially after you've debated something, will come around to your position or see where you're coming from. But it just seems that there's just no chance at that. This is the King James translators meant a horse with a horn in the middle of its head, the mythical creature. That's it. And they were wrong to have that marginal note. They were wrong to have unicorn, and it should be a wild ox, an auroch, or the like. So anything but that sort of thing.
Picking up myths or legends, but it isn't the unicorn. So by way of illustration, this is a unicorn as it was understood in the late medieval period. There's a young lady who has charmed this unicorn, but other than this young lady has not known a man, if you understand what I'm saying. You don't want to trigger the algorithm with words that will unnecessarily rate this program differently. But young ladies such as herself were able to tame the unicorn, which no one else was able to tame, according to the myth. But there are multiple reasons, as I say in my post, there's multiple reasons to oppose the translation of unicorn for the Hebrew word Reem. The first, and in my mind the most significant, is that unicorn conjures up images like that one on the right. And there's, I have some links on my blog page. You feel free to go to them. The theology at these posts is not always up to snuff, but it is what it is. Don't beware as you click through links on this post. I'm just linking to the places that have information, and their theology is not always great.
Okay, so I would agree that yes, people, because what in the debate I said a unicorn is an umbrella term, like a narwhal is considered a unicorn. This mythical creature is considered a unicorn, and a rhinoceros is considered a unicorn. So these are all these are all under the banner of a unicorn, and so that's what I meant by an umbrella term. This word unicorn applies to any type of beetle or any type of animal, anything with a unicorn in it, like anything with one horn. And so it's actually characteristic. It's a characteristic of that animal that it has one horn. And so so let's continue.
Moreover, while some of the more zealous advocates of the King James, more zealous than me, I'm an advocate for the King James. I love it. It's a great translation. I will continue to say that, even despite these criticisms. They will argue sometimes that the King James translators had in mind a rhinoceros, or the like. The term unicorn in English, some of them will actually suggest that it might be some kind of dinosaur, maybe a dinosaur that was around in the Old Testament period but has since died out. Some kind of sauropod dinosaur. But that is not the usual explanation. Extinct animals are sometimes the explanation, but not typically a dinosaur for this particular animal. So what about this animal, though? The term unicorn in English, they will say, is some kind of umbrella term, and that doesn't mean this white horse with a narwhal tusk horn, as shown here.
No, it does mean that. We're not saying that at all. We're saying a unicorn is this, it's a narwhal, it's anything with one horn. If this lady walked around with one horn sticking out of her head, we would call her the unicorn lady or whatever. A unicorn just means that she's got one horn. And so, certain weapons were named unicorn because they just had one big gun or whatever. And when I'm saying it's a blanket term, it is a description of that can involve any type of creature.
Here, but this is I've provided a link here to a tapestry, the story of the unicorn. This is these tapestries are woven around 1500. They represent some of the legend that was around at that time. You can see.
Okay, so we've got this unicorn mythical creature.
The same type of general animal, a very long, pointy horn. It has some kind of goat-like beard. It looks generally like a horse. It's dangerous, and there's lots of other kind of fanciful creatures that it's surrounded by.
Yeah, so you see in that picture, it's all these weird looking, creatures, half monkey, half dog,
Let's come back, though. There are cases where the language has changed. So there are cases where I'm trying to think of some examples. The first one that comes to mind is something like meat that's sold in the shambles is mentioned in one of Paul's epistles in the King James Version. And today, shambles no longer means the meat market. So if you're reading that today and you get a recent edition of the King James Version, it's nice to have a little asterisk next to the word that says, this is an old word that means meat market, or something.
And that's what the Trinitarian Bible Society and D.A. Waite's books usually have that type of definition. Shambles is not something that we would use here in Australia either. And I know, I think it was Stephen Anderson, he talked about the shambles. But basically what he did was, and what I've done quite a lot, is you show where something like the shambles is, but then you'll show, say even in the New King James, it'll have this reading, Wahab of Supra. Wahab of Supra. And it's like, what does that mean? But when you look at the King James, it's perfectly clear exactly what it means. But these guys have just transliterated it into something that no one can understand. And so it sort of does go both ways. Now, I understand that just by pointing out the New King James has some places that is unreadable doesn't mean the King James is completely 100% readable for everyone who just picks it up the first time. We encourage people to go to the Oxford English Dictionary, to go to Webster's, to look at these things and to Google these terms, look at the etymology of these words and discover what they mean. And so that's part of being a good student of the Word of God is studying these things out. Many people will look at what the Hebrew means, what the Greek means. I spend time doing that. But if you spend a little bit of time studying these things in English, they're like, this is a waste of time. Why are you doing that? You should just read the New King James on the MEV. But oftentimes, like the New King James here has wild ox. And so to me, that's completely wrong. And we're going to see why, because this animal clearly only has one horn. But let's continue.
Like that. Those are useful terms, and those are useful explanations. And while that's a little bit misleading today, and if we were doing an updated version of the King James Version, which I don't think a successful update will kind of catch on because of people's tendency to like either the 1611 or the Blaney edition or the Cambridge edition, one of those three. It's hard to imagine that a brand new revision will ever fully catch on. People like the these and thous. They're emotionally attached to them. I know I am. I really like the these and thous. But that's neither here nor there. Maybe it will catch on. If it does, and someone does an update to the King James Version that's more popular than the New King James Version, then this would be a place where shambles, as an example, would be a place where we'd want to update the language. There's a number of other examples like that. Now, this word, is it one of those? Is this a word where we could say it says unicorn, but back then, when they said unicorn, they just meant a rhinoceros? Well, the short answer to that question is no. There are cases where language has changed. This doesn't seem to be one of those cases. The kind of animal shown in that painting on the right side is mythical in the sense.
And so because there's a painting here of an animal and the other one that he showed with these mythical animals, that sort of is proof enough. But when you look at these other ones that I was showing you, so, whoops, I'm just trying to find that page. Well, so even, where are we?
Fables, not.
I think I might. Oh, no, that's fine. Sorry, I've just got so many pages open, so many projects going on at the same time. Where are we? Printable. Okay, no, none of them. Okay. shut that down. I've got another video playing in the background. I've got so many things happening. Sorry about this. I'm actually trying to find where all that is. It's not really showing. Oh, it's right in front of me. That's why. Okay, so this is the Answers in Genesis article. I'll actually, this is how many tabs I've got open of just stuff. So unicorns in the Bible. So this is in 2015 or 2008. I remember this coming out, and so people were talking about, different types of animals. Yeah, and they've got the same picture. But notice, even Answers in Genesis, they have this, a unicorn in the background. And so why is TurritinFan only pointing to this type of thing and saying that's all they knew? It just, what were the King James translators illiterates? Didn't they know? Okay, so I'll just save that page because it's older. Maybe I shouldn't have saved that. But yeah, what about this thing? This is in 1550. This is Dürer. Like, he was one of the most famous artists of that era. He drew Erasmus, you know what I'm saying? And why didn't, this is 100 years before the King James translators, so they didn't know about this. None of them, all 60 of them, were just sort of looking at each other like, I don't know, but let's just go with the mythical thing. No, this is clearly a rhinoceros. So I just, it's actually frustrating to think that TurritinFan's sort of making out that they're saying it's just a mythical creature. It's just, it's actually a little bit annoying, but let's just continue. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's have a look.
History. And while the ancients do sometimes write about such an animal, for example, Pliny the Elder seems to have some discussion, Aristotle seems to have some kind of discussion, and so forth, this is still not a real animal. And there's no good reason to think that there has ever been a species.
So he's saying Pliny was writing about a mythical creature. Okay, so let's just have a look, because I'm pretty sure I've got Pliny's definition here. Okay, Pliny the Elder. He has an exceedingly wild beast called the Monoceros, one-horned. It makes a deep lowing noise, okay? And one black horn, 2 cubits long, projects from the middle of its forehead. This animal, they say, cannot be taken alive. So I'm not saying that this is an Indian rhinoceros, but it's pretty certain. So this is where TurritinFan makes quite a big deal about, the middle of its forehead. See, this is where things have to be translated absolutely perfectly. Sometimes you can go through the early church writers, and there can be 4 or 5 different interpretations of that, and when you read them, you're like, oh, that's actually coming out of its head or whatever, or coming from its face or something like that, and so you can see differences. I'm not saying that happens here. I'm just saying that would be one of the first things that I would check about the genuineness of this quote. But regardless, I would say that this creature here, well, I discovered last night the Carcadon. So this, here in this video, TurritinFan was saying, oh, it's probably not something that was found in the Middle East. I mean, usually if you can find things in Africa, if you find things in Asia, they do usually make their way through the Middle East. It's probably the only way that they could get these type of things through to Europe and other places. And so this was a description of this type of animal. And so we look in the 10th, 11th century Persian scholar Abu Rayhan al-Biruni. So he was from 973 to 1048. He describes an animal which has the build of a buffalo, a black scaly skin, a dewlap hanging down under the skin. It has 3 yellow hooves on each foot. Its tail is not long. The eyes lie low, farther down the cheek than is the case with other animals. On the top of his nose, there is a single horn, which is bent upwards. So a fragment of Alberini's preserved work of another author adds more characteristics. The horn is conical, bent back toward the head, and longer than a span. The animal's ears protrude on both sides like those of a donkey, and its upper lips form into a finger shape like the protrusion on the end of an elephant's trunk. These two descriptions leave no doubt that the Indian rhinoceros is the basis for the animal. The Persian language uses the same word, karkadan, for the mythological animal as it does for the rhinoceros. So now when it has that there, I just copied and pasted that from Wikipedia last night. So would I say that that's exactly, I would probably say these two descriptions sound like it is the Indian rhinoceros or something equivalent, or an ancient extinct animal of that was similar. So they have a picture of it. So obviously, this is not the same unicorn as English people were talking about, with a horn in the middle, talking about in fantasy books and things like that. This is something. It's sort of like an elephant with a horn and all the rest of it. And so it could be the Elasmarithium. And so it's called the giant unicorn. And so it grew up to 2.7 meters high and 6 meters long. 6 meters is very huge. It's a massive animal. I mean, this is an artist description of it. It could have been this. And so this is just one of the things where, okay, actually, I already did have the Karkadan written there. Sorry, I thought I'd found something new. There must have been something else that I found, because I was going through the Wikipedia pages. Where are we? Yeah, the Javan rhinoceros. So this is part of the rhinoceros. You have the Rhinoceros unicornis, then you have rhinoceros, and there's another name for them. But yeah, so in Java they have these ones. I think these ones are completely extinct, or but yeah, there was a whole bunch of other ones. Different types of rhinoceroses. The Juxia, which is sort of just got like a big nose sort of thing, where I don't think it's a rhinoceros horn. It's actually just a huge lump on its head. And we're looking at the unicorn, different depictions of that, and the unicorn's horn. And so one of the things is the unicorn's horn is supposed to have medicinal properties to it. So the medicinal properties is whether you're thinking of a magical thing or whether you're thinking it's a rhinoceros's horn. The Chinese, I mean, still today, they kill these things and they cook food with the horn, thinking that it's going to heal them of certain problems. And this happens in Indonesia. This happens in Southeast Asia. A lot of these animals have become extinct because people will pay top dollar for their horns. It's just like ivory or something like that. It's just become mythical. It's become invaluable to have these type of things. So what TurritinFan does in his expose is he sort of, anytime someone's talking about some type of mystical thing with the horn, or it's got medicinal purposes, he's always pointing it back to this type of thing, where I'm like, no, it doesn't, just because this is mythical it doesn't mean that other certain parts of, say, the Indian rhino and other things are not seen as having these mystical type of qualities about the horn. And so, anyway, let's just continue.
A white horse with an narwhal tusk on its forehead, even if there are some ancient reports of such an animal. And that's true whether or not it has the magical properties ascribed to unicorns in European folk and fairy tales. Shakespeare, for example, he died in
Okay, so he's about to look at Shakespeare. Now, the thing is, a unicorn, like I was saying, it covers many, many different creatures. But the narwhal is a unicorn. All of these, any rhinoceros that has one horn is called a unicorn, usually scientifically. So that type of terminology came around later, but they do that on purpose because it just means one horn. Uni and corn, it's like Unitarian, you believe in one, or Trinitarian had three, and bicornus, it's got two. And these type of definitions are very settled in Latin and in Greek, monoceros or monokeros, this type of thing. And so that has been the basis for our scientific terminologies. And so, yeah, clearly it does encompass whether it's mythical, real, whether it's a rhino or a beetle or something. These things have these type of words in it to describe exactly what it is.
In 1616, so he's contemporaneous with the King James translators. He makes reference to unicorns in several of his plays, and he associates them with these myths and legends that we talk about. And an example is...
So because Shakespeare talks about myths, that's what the King James thought they were too. It's like, it's pretty weak. And the thing is, the example that he gives of Shakespeare here, when I go through it, it's like, I could see that as referring to the rhinoceros as well, even though it might be Shakespeare talking about something else, but like talking about a mythical creature, it's not really that clear. And so this is what I find. TurritinFan is not saying, well, it could be, couldn't be. It's just, no, this is definitely this. And so let's have a look.
In his Timon of Athens, Act 4, Scene 3, there's a link there if you're curious. Shakespeare has Timon say, "Wert thou the unicorn, pride and wrath would confound thee, and make thine own self the conquest of thy fury." And that's referring to this legend that with the unicorn, the only way to really defeat it was to basically infuriate it, stand in front of a big sturdy tree like an oak or walnut tree, something like this, wait for the unicorn to try to stab you with his long horn, and at the very last moment dodge aside so the unicorn impales itself into the tree. Because it's coming with so much force and speed and power, it will go right into the tree, and then it gets stuck in the tree, and then you can capture the unicorn that way. So then it's at your mercy without its powerful horn. And if you want a more detailed discussion of Shakespeare and unicorns, there's a well-illustrated page, and I have a link there to it.
Okay, so reading through this, what Shakespeare said was, "Wert the unicorn, pride and wrath would confound thee, and make thine own self the conquest of thy fury." And so TurritinFan's explaining this. I'm not sure if this is just the explanation on the website, but it's basically saying, how to capture this beast. You have a piece of wood and it'll attack the piece of wood, but then it will get stuck on it. Does that have to be describing the horse type of unicorn, or can it be a rhino? Is this a way of capturing a rhino? So he's saying that this has illustrations. So we want to make sure that these illustrations back up what is being said here. So here we have the actual blog page. I've made it nice and big so everyone can have a quick look. So we're at Shakespeare. Okay, see the discussion. Okay, so it's a bit of a chat there. So that's all that he says about it there. Okay, so yeah, obviously he's gotten this information from this website. Okay, so Virgin Mary's holding unicorn. But that obviously, what's that got to do with it? You know what I mean? It's like 1480. Could you just have a picture of a rhinoceros there? You know what I mean? Could I? Then it just goes straight into King James and the Bible, unicorns in the Bible. Follow the Septuagint, the Latin Vulgate, choose unicorn from Reem. In the present day, the word is translated as wild ox. So obviously these guys have a bit of a bias. So these are unicorns as well. The narwhal and others. Okay, so there's a unicorns may be betrayed with trees. Okay, so that's in Julius Caesar. Yeah, these are all different types of animals, like a walking sort of monkey thing. But it doesn't seem to be saying that when it's talking about the unicorn here, wert thou the unicorn, and pride and wrath would confound thee, and make thine own self the conquest of thy fury. Is it saying this? Now, if it is saying no, that's fine. Is it, if it is completely mythical, I'd have to read it all in context, but it just seems that TurritinFan is just saying it's only this. It can't be anything else. Okay. Which to me, it's like, okay, well, that would be something I would have to look at, study, think about, and go through. And I noticed TurritinFan was sort of like, oh, if you keep reading through Shakespeare, you'll find other instances, so you can clearly tell that it's just a horse type of creature. But when you look at these quotes, if a man may, if he were of a fearful heart, stagger in this attempt, for here we have no temple but the wood, no assembly but horn beasts. So where is that saying that it's like a horse? That unicorns may be betrayed with trees. Okay. Does this picture come along? Did Shakespeare draw that picture? No. And so that's what I'm saying. It's like, okay, well, I mean, if it was, if it said here, like it was like a horse with a horn, it's like, okay, cool. That's what Shakespeare is talking about. But this is what I find with TurritinFan. He's just reading into this. Someone's made a website about it. It looks good. And so let's just go with it. I mean, anyone can I could just jump on here and make a website and look like this. And even Turritin has this picture on his website as well. Okay, and so he's got linked to the well illustrated page. So we got this thing. So he's specifically got that on his page. So I'm not sure if that one appears. Let's have a look. Okay, so notice there's no mention whatsoever of a rhino, whatsoever. Okay, so that's exactly the same page. So, and maybe I should just quickly click on it. I'll go
Hello and welcome to this
21 minutes. Remember Charlie the Unicorn? That's a classic. Anyway, I'll pull out of that. So let's just read this again. Shakespeare. Actually, I'll let TurritinFan say it. Let me just rewind it a little bit. So we're at 1406. Let's go to say 13.
Associates them with these myths and legends that we talk about. And an example is in his Timon of Athens, Act 4, Scene 3. There's a link there if you're curious. Shakespeare has Timon say, "Wert thou the unicorn, pride and wrath would confound thee, and make thine own self the conquest of thy fury." And that's referring to this legend that with the unicorn, the only way to really defeat it was to basically infuriate it, stand in front of a big sturdy tree like an oak or walnut tree, something like this, wait for the unicorn to try to stab you with his long horn, and at the very last moment dodge aside so that the unicorn impales itself into the tree. Because it's coming with so much force and speed and power, it will go right into the tree, and then it will get stuck in the tree, and then you can capture the unicorn that way. So then it's at your mercy without its powerful horn. And if you want a more detailed discussion of Shakespeare and unicorns, there's a well-illustrated page, and I have a link there to it. I'm not going to go through that other page now. Don't want to steal the thunder of that author. But the bottom line is, it was a well-established idea of what a unicorn was. The people of Shakespeare's time, the people of the time of the King James translators, knew what a unicorn was. They understand the legends. They understood what it supposedly could and couldn't do. And they had a concrete idea. And no.
So he's just saying absolutely 100% that Shakespeare's talking about that type of creature.
Shakespeare didn't mean a rhinoceros. He meant a unicorn.
How? See, this is the thing. That is not scholarship. If there's other places in Shakespeare where it clearly says that, or where he talks about this mythical creature, you really need to point those places out, because this is not convincing to me. Now, to just say, wert thou the unicorn, pride and wrath would confound thee, and make thine own self the conquest of thy fury. Where is that saying that it's definitely not a rhinoceros? Why are you going with that? And why is it just, after you've read through that, you're just saying it's definitely not a rhinoceros? How come you're saying that? It's just your own conclusion. To me, that's your own bias. You just have a bias against the King James, and you're just saying, definitely this example that I'm giving is definitely not an example of a rhinoceros. And it's like, well, perhaps if he lived in 1616, he would have. I mean, there's a whole bunch of Geneva Bible quotes in Shakespeare. But if he was in 1616, he would have looked at the King James. He probably would have known and said unicorn or rhinoceros there. So why would it's? I don't know what to say. Why did you come to that conclusion? It's got to be explained better than just, I found this website that I agree with and I'm just going with it. I mean, how come I can show you a picture of a rhino by one of Europe's most famous artists, and in 1515, so 100 years before this is in 1616, it's clearly a picture of an Indian rhinoceros. Why isn't it that? Well, I just don't understand the disconnect there. I don't understand why you've gone with that definition and why you only see that. If there is other data that you haven't shown us, or sometimes I do this, I think people are going to get it. So okay, well, just read that and you'll get it. And sometimes it's like, oh, actually, I should have really explained this other little bit on the side, and now they get it. But I'm just not seeing with what you've shown there. To me, that could go either way. Now, if it does go the side of a mythical creature, fine. If it does go the side of the rhinoceros, okay. But at the end of the day, I think you're reading into this just what you want to see. And you're saying it clearly can't be a rhino. It's like, well, how do you come to that conclusion? I'm not saying this clearly can't be a mythical creature. And if I did say that, you would say, oh, hang on, you've got a bias there. Well, that's what I see that you have here.
And if this one itself, this excerpt itself isn't enough, you can go and read the other ones. It's pretty clear that he does mean something like what we see here. Now, the one on the right that I'm pointing at on the screen right now, it's a little bit older illustration, less of that classical white horse look, but still an animal with this long horn on its forehead. It's less aesthetically pleasing than, but again, you can see it's being charmed by the young lady, and it seems to have been killed now by someone else who's taking advantage of the unicorn's one weakness, aside from its ability to self-impale. or sorry, to kind of impale itself on a tree. So the medievals thought that this animal was a threat to elephants, but tameable by certain young ladies. A book of beasts that you can find in the Bodleian Library explains the story of the unicorn and follows it with a quotation from Psalm 92:10. So even in the medieval period, they did think there was a link between these fanciful creatures and the biblical term. Why? Because the Vulgate also used unicorn.
Okay, so we'll have to examine that one. So let's look at. So moreover, the early modern notions of the unicorn spring out of the medieval legends. For example, the manuscript illustration. So why is that? Why don't they go back to the monoceros, to the unicornus, to other things? Why does it only have to be these? For example, the manuscript illustration at the right shows a unicorn as imagined around 1250. Okay. In the medieval understanding, this savage beast was a threat to elephants, but was tameable by a virgin. One book of beasts or bestiary in the Bodleian Library explains the story of a unicorn and follows it with a quotation from Psalm 92:10. So let's have a look at this. The little known tale of the medieval unicorn. Okay. Meet 19 animals of the medieval bestiary in the Book of Beasts, a blog series created by art students in UCLA with the guidance of Professor so-and-so, etc. With a mighty horn on a donkey stout body, the unicorn is an oddity in the pages of illuminated bestiaries. Today, we know the unicorn as an imaginary animal and a coy and playful emoji. In the Middle Ages, however, the unicorn had a tragic tale, one quite unlike its light-hearted smartphone counterpart. Bestiaries were illuminated. So I might just bring my head here because some people might jump on and not know what's going on. Illuminated manuscripts that combine stories of real and imagined animals, using them as allegories for Christian morals, part theological and part pseudo-zoological. They were designed to reinforce faith in Christian doctrines in the Middle Ages, etc. Okay, so then it's got Psalm 92:10. In the bestiary, the unicorn's story is an allegory of Christ's death. As with Christ's crucifixion for mankind's sins, the unicorn is caught and killed. One bestiary details of the unicorn story as it follows it with Psalm 92:10. My horn shalt thou exalt like the horn of an unicorn. Okay. So yeah, we've got another beastie sort of unicorn thing there. So that's the picture that TurritinFan has up there. So there's really not that much else here. So he's just sort of saying, okay, other people thought there were fanciful one-horn creatures around as well. Yeah. I can agree with that. So let's shut that one down. Oops. The term unicorn, okay, so we're going back into what Turritin's going to read anyway, so let's go through it.
For these animals. So, the term unicorn wasn't a unfamiliar word at the time in 1600, so there was a dictionary of hard words or difficult words in 1602, and unicorn, of course, didn't make that list. It was a familiar word at that time. The earliest English dictionary that I could find that lists the word unicorn provides exactly the definition you would expect from the above. Even a more complete dictionary a few years later, it provides essentially the same definition. Now, these are dictionaries from a century later, but they're consistent with the medieval illustration. The first dictionary I could find that didn't explicitly talk about this mythical beast was from the late 1700s.
Okay, so I know my website, which is I'll just look up unicorn on my page, even though I've got it open somewhere. I've got a big mess here. Okay, so I actually have this in my articles, like down the bottom, where it's like, if you read through them, you should be convinced. But apparently, TurritinFan is not convinced at all by what I've got to say. So, yeah, here I have Elisha Coles, and in 1717 he has unicornus of one horn. Okay, now I think he does mention that, but let's look at some Middle English definitions. Okay, so this I won't hide from you where I've got this from. So if you go to the Middle English Compendium, rhinoceros here. Okay, well, that's a link to rhinoceros. The unicorn is a wild beast by kind and may be tamed by no wise. Okay, so that's under rhinoceron. It has here, there being many kinds of unicorn, for some being rhinoceron and some being monoceron and eglyceron. Okay, so I'm not sure what that third one is, but obviously a rhinoceron and a monoceron. It's talking about unicorns. So we're looking in 1398 here. So, I mean, I haven't really exhausted, let's say with Easter, I've gone through a whole bunch of stuff with Easter in Middle English and Old English, and going through your different things with Easter. But when it comes to unicorn, I didn't think there was any need for that because it's so obvious to me. But, obviously, TurritinFan feels that this is a place where you can easily show that King James has made a mistake. So it has another beast here is that rhinoceros. For on his snout is an horn. He bears part he sleep with lions and bears. So it's hard to read the Old English, but you can sort of, if you just sort of skim over it quickly, you can sort of get it. If you focus too much on the letters, you'll struggle. So look at what Marco Polo said. The unicorn, untamable only by a virgin woman, was well established in medieval law by the time of Marco Polo, described them as scarcely smaller than elephants. They have the hair of a buffalo and feet like elephants. They have a single large black horn in the middle of their forehead, and they have a head like a wild boar. They spend their time preference wallowing in mud and slime. They're very ugly brutes to look at. They are not so much as we describe them when we relate that they let themselves be captured by virgins, but clean contrary to our notions. So I think what Marco Polo is describing is this type of thing. It's just these things are massive, and I don't know a type of dinosaur that was in mud and all that sort of stuff. So it's definitely talking about something like that. It could be an Indian rhinoceros. But with these other options, it's like, well, that's why I think unicorn is a good medium, because is it this? Is it that? Is it the Indian rhinoceros? It's like, well, it's a unicorn. It's a one-horned beast. That's huge. And so, okay. So we'll just, okay. So let's just open a few of these. So we've got the a table alphabetical. Okay, so that's just a link to the book, actually. Okay, so does it have unicorn there? See, the V's and the U's sometimes are the same. It took a while for that to become standardized. It doesn't have unicorn there. Might be spelled differently. Universal. Unite. Anyway, looks like I can't find much on that one. But let's just go to here. Okay, so we have a little unicorn. A beast said to be as big as a horse, having one white horn in the middle of its forehead, about 5 handfuls long. Okay, so they're saying, he's saying that that's the definition of a unicorn in 1617. Okay. 7008 dictionary has, actually that's the one I just looked at. Okay, and then he says it was pretty much the same on the next one, so no point going through that. So, okay, so let's keep going through this.
But that's because it was an etymological dictionary, and he just explained the etymology of the term. The etymology of unicorn should be fairly obvious. It's from one and horn. That's what it means. It means a one-horned animal.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying all the way through. Anything that's one-horned is described as a unicorn. Okay, so some people might want to emphasize on the mythological. Others later on, scientists use that for a rhinoceros to say, okay, it's got one horn, rhinoceros unicorns. Okay, so so he has the first dictionary that I could find was Samuel Johnson's 1768 dictionary. Okay, that dictionary does not even hint to the broader meaning of unicorn, but simply does not explicitly define it on fabulous terms. There's one exception. Johnson suggests that the word could refer to a bird. The absence of a more narrow explanation of the term is best explained by the fact that Johnson was aiming to provide etymology, and the etymology of unicorn is fairly obvious and straightforward. Uni, one, horn, horn. Finally, in 1828, there is a dictionary that suggests that the term could be used for a beat, real or fabulous, with one horn, hinting at the possibility of referring to something other than what we think is a unicorn. So I'm going to have a look at these two. So we'll just, oops, I shouldn't have done that. I'm going to struggle getting that back up. Okay, yeah, I can stay there, and it can stay there. Here we are. So I'm glad he's got all these little links here. It's very helpful. Unicorn. Unus and cornus Latin, a beast that has only one horn. Okay. Doesn't say it's mythical. See, this is the thing. It's like, okay, well, can't that go either way? Any beast that has one horn, really, has Shakespeare, Sandys, and then it has second definition, a bird, a grue. Okay, so some bird was named unicorn. Okay, so we'll go to the next one. So this is a later edition of that, I think. Looks very similar. Oops. Uniform, unicorn. A beast that has only one horn and a bird. Okay. Not really saying much. So you couldn't really go either way. The absence of a more narrow explanation of the term is best explained by the fact that Johnson was aiming to provide an etymology. Okay. So finally, 1828, there's a dictionary that suggests the term could be used for a beast real or fabulous with one horn, hinting at the possibility of referring to something other than what we think of as a unicorn. So link to previous, or to the relevant page, sorry. So this is the Webster's dictionary. So uni horse, to beat from a horse, or unhorse, sorry. Uni horn, a beast whether real or fabulous that has only one horn, and also a bird. I mean, the 1914, see, this is the thing. Okay, we're looking through dictionaries, but usually it's just the usage of a word that shows you what it is, what an animal is, or what a word means. So let's let TurritinFan just continue.
In 1828, there is a dictionary, an English dictionary, that suggests that the term could be for a it says a beat. It should say beast. I'll try to update that afterwards. Real or fabulous with one horn, hinting at the possibility of referring to something other than what we think as a unicorn. That's the first occasion I could find, nearly 2 centuries, not nearly, over 2 centuries after the King James was originally translated. I say originally translated. We can come to that in a little bit. This is not an original translation. Obviously, it's just copying the same word the Vulgate used in many places.
So what about like Webster's 1828? Let's have a quick look. Webster's 1828. Unicorn. An animal with one horn, the monoceros. So it's saying this is equivalent to the Greek monoceros, okay? This name is often applied to the rhinoceros. So why isn't he reading these ones? You know what I mean? The sea unicorn is a fish, a narwhal, so obviously unicorn is exactly what it's saying. And it's a fowl, some sort of bird. The fossil unicorn or fossil unicorn's horn, a substance used in medicine. So I just, to me, that just, I'm just not seeing why is that not there. In 1828, you had this, but you had this other one that said this. Perhaps he does go into it, and I've sort of missed it.
And literally translating the etymological meaning of the Greek word in the Septuagint. The 1914 Glossary of Tudor Words confirms that unicorn's horn was thought to possess magical properties. And the same page suggests that we check out the 1884 Bible Word Book, which explains that something similar to a bison is the actual meaning of the Hebrew word. Also explains what the term unicorn was meant to be, citing Blundeville's Exercises. Blundeville's Exercises is a textbook from the late 1500s. Now, it was published in 1594 or so, and Blundeville's Exercises makes it clear that to an educated person in the late 1500s, a unicorn was the fabulous mystical, yes, mystical, but also mythical beast.
Okay, so we'll look at that particular one. Okay, so we've looked at Webster's. Yeah, so it's saying here the 1914 Glossary of Tudor Words, the unicorn's horn was thought to possess magical properties. People think that of the rhinoceros. That's why oftentimes they kill it. That's why it's going extinct in Southeast Asia. People kill these things and use their horns and for medicinal reasons. And so that's why, many times the government has to get involved and put, huge fines, and then they'll shoot poachers. And so, I mean, just to say, because there's a magical thing with a horn, that's talking about the mythical creature. No, that relates both to a rhinoceros and to the mythical creature. So, but let's look at this one. Bible Word Book, a glossary of archaic words and phrases in the authorized version of the Bible and the Book of Common Prayer. So this is in 1884, Princeton. So they're saying these are the wrong words. And I'm pretty sure if we go through the revised version, they have retranslated these. I am pretty sure. Now, it's actually hard to find the revised version. Like off the top of my head, I'm like, revised version, where would you go for that? Because Westcott and Hort's Bible just flopped. Okay, let's have a quick look here. Revised version. Read revised version. Okay. So let's say go to Isaiah 34. Was it 34:11? I think it was. Okay, so let's have a quick look. (34:7). And the wild oxen shall come down. So obviously, this is with a bias. It's talking about archaic words and phrases in the authorized version. Okay. So these are the sort of books that Westcott and Hort probably used in their translation. The Reem of the Hebrews, of which unicorn is a translation, was probably a bison. The following passage explains what the unicorn was believed to be. A unicorn, as Louis Vartinian testifieth. I'll just make this a bit bigger. We'll go to a single page. Unicorn. I'll go nice and big here so you guys can read along. He saw two of them in the town of Mecca. Is the height of a young horse or colt of 30 months old, which is 2 years and a half old. He and the head of a hart. He hath the head of a hart, and the forehead he hath a shape-pointed horn 3 cubits long. He hath a long neck, and a mane hanging down on one side of his neck. His legs are slender, and the legs of a goat, as the legs of a goat, and his feet are cloven, much like the goat. His hinder feet are hairy, and his hair in colour is like to a bay horse. This beast in countenance is cruel and wild, and yet notwithstanding mixed with certain sweetness and amiableness. His horse is of a marvellous great force and a virtue against venom and poison. The unicorn is found in Ethiopia, like as the Indian ass is found in India, which hath likewise only one horn in its forehead. The Indian ass. So it is, maybe that was an old word for unicorn. Let's have a look. This is Indian ass. The Indian ox. The unicorn's horn. Okay. Surely it is distinct from the rhinoceros. Okay. Carrying the horn not in its forehead but on its nose. Okay. That's interesting. That's in 1662. Fuller on unicorn's horns. That's interesting. But is that what he's talking about here? It's sort of what's talked about here. Okay, so among the many precious rarities in the tower, this, as another in Windsor Castle, was in my memory. Shown to the people, it belongs not to me to inquire what is become of them, but rather to discuss whether there be such a creature as a unicorn, what the fashion and colour, what kind of animal is it, and what's the use and effect of his horn. Okay. For the first, they produce a weak proof who allege them to be supporters of Scottish arms and the arms of English gentlemen, particularly of the family of Paris in Cambridgeshire, seeing most heralds wear the addition of painters, and the fancy of painters pretend to be the privilege of law. I sort of have to read the whole thing. Of lawless liberty. But besides that it is uncivil to give lie to a common tradition, the former existence of such a creature, and surely no species is wholly lost, is clearly from several places of Scripture. God hath it were the strength of a unicorn. Will the unicorn be willing to serve thee? My horn shall exalt like the horn of a unicorn. And true it is, the word in the original importeth nothing of any horn therein, as doth Latin unicornus and the Greek monoceros. So he's saying that they, unicornus and monoceros, are unrelated to unicorn in English, apparently. Yeah, I'm confident it is right rendered, because it is so rendered, such was the learning and piety of the persons that employed in that translation. Proceed we now for a second query of that kind. Surely it is distinct from the rhinoceros, having a horn not in its forehead but on its nose, because the exaltation of the horn is not considerable, but as not bunching forth much above a foot in the prominency thereof. He is commonly pictured, buoyed like a buck, with the horn advanced out of his forehead, some 2 yards in proportion, and his picture confuteth his picture, seeing generally he is held to be no beast of prey, but which findeth on the grass, and if so, his mouth cannot meet with the ground. The interposition of the horn so fancifully fixed, making so great distance betwixt them. The plain truth is, I, who first questioned whether there are any unicorns, am since convinced that there are so many sorts of them. Now listen to this. This is just absolutely writing off the whole concept of all the dictionaries. Let's just go through them. Okay. So he's saying, what are these unicorns? The Indian ox, the Indian ass, the Aurochs, and famous for carrying one horn, but which the prize in this lottery I cannot decide, seeing none alive in our land have seen 4-footed beasts of that kind. And Julius Scaliger says truly, and this is in Latin, ex libris. Okay, I can't read that. Maybe I'll just quickly throw that into translate. Together from the books which authors have published alone is most dangerous. The knowledge of the things themselves is true, and of the things themselves. Okay. So Ollis Worm, one no less curious inquire into the mysteries than careful preserver of the rarities of nature, physician at this day to the King of Denmark, in a learned work which he lately set forth, endeavored to prove under all a general mistake, who fancy a unicorn a 4-footed beast, proving the same to be a fish in the northern seas of 22 foot in length, a long horn in his forehead, no more cumbersome in the portage than ears are to other beasts, and which the horn in horn he titleth as his prey, and having pierced it through, doth afterward feed on it. If it be objected to the contrary, that in Scripture he is ranked among the quadrupeds, and the unicorn shall come down with them, the bullocks and the bulls, and their land shall be soaked with blood, and their dust shall dust make fat with fatness, it will be answered that unicorns are not real but metaphorical, rendered appellatively robusty in some translations, importing that strong enemies both by water and land shall invade Idumea to the utter destruction thereof. Come now to the fashion and colour of the horn, conceiving it no considerable controversy concerning the length and bigness thereof, quantity not varying in such cases. So I'm just going to sort of read through some of this because it's getting quite tedious to read this old English, or older English. Someone will say it's not old English. But yeah, an interesting article there. So that is very interesting. But I find it even more interesting that this is the Westcott and Hort figured this out, apparently. Okay, so the Indian ass. So that's actually what I was searching for. So I'm going to search for that again. Oops. Let's just get all that. Of the Indian asses. So this is in some guy who died in 1565. Okay, so he is saying it is questionable whether monoceros, commonly called a unicorn. So the monoceros, that's a Greek word, called a unicorn, the rhinoceros, the oryx, and the Indian ass be all one beast or divers. So is it all the same, or are they different? Okay. For the unicorn and rhinoceros have the same things attributed to them in stories. So that's exactly what I'm saying. When you read through the literature, you're like, okay, people saw a rhinoceros, they saw that they sometimes labeled it as a unicorn as a rhinoceros. Later on, this became rhinoceros unicornus for a certain rhino, and differ in very few reports. I might enlarge in this because I know this is very tiny. But as for the asses of India, both Aristotle, Pliny, and Alanius jointly agree that they differ from all other whole-footed beasts because they have the one horn in the forehead, and so also have the rhinoceros, the monoceros, the oryx. So they're saying the oryx here has one horn, but the Indians call a unicorn ketazono. That's interesting. Definitely be looking at that. Oh, we found a picture of this ketazono. It's a unicorn, guys. But apparently we're not supposed to know this. The Indians call unicorn ketazono. I say that with a Spanish accent for some reason. And the horn so highly prized at this day is thought to be of the rhinoceros. But Alanius and Phileas acknowledge no other unicorn than the Indian ass, who in bigness equaleth a horse among the Indians, being all white on the body, but purple-headed or red as some say, black eyes, but Voltarinus saith blue, having one horn in its forehead, a cubit and a half long, whose upper part is red or bay, in the middle black, and neither part white, wherein the kings and mighty men of India used to drink, adorning it for that purpose with sundry bracelets, precious stones, and works of gold, holding for truth that all those which drank from the horns shall be freed from the annoyance of incurable diseases as convulsions, the falling evil, and deadly poisons. So like I was saying, there's this mystery around the horns, whether they're mythical or whether they're, actual creatures. So for TurritinFan to sort of only say anything that's sort of to do with mythical, the horns, that's talking about this mythological creature. These wild asses exceed all other, both in stature of body and also swiftness of foot. For at the first they set forth very gently, and afterwards speed their journey with better pace, so that it is very hard for any to follow them, but impossible to overgo them. The males take great pain in keeping their young ones, whom they continually watch and hide in the most remote and desert places they can find. When they are hunted, they keep their weak ones behind them and fight for them very ferociously. Neither fear they to encounter horsemen. They are so strong that no beast may stand before them, for they will receive the charges of horses with such violence that in their counter they bite out their sides and tear their guts out of their belly, for which cause they are dreadful to horses, who are most unwilling to join with them. For they never meet, but they both perish. They fight with their heels, but their teeth are most dangerous, for that they apprehend in them, they bring it clean away. And because of this rage, those which are of any years can never be tamed. The great king of India doth once every year appoint all manner of fights, both men and beasts, wherein are wild bulls, tame rams, these wild asses with the one horn, hyenas and elephants. To conclude, it is but a fable of Voltarinus. Thus saith, these asses want a gall, for they have the bladder of a gall, a portion whereof drunk cureth the falling evil. So people, some people eat a heart of an animal or whatever, whatever they do to, when I was in Indonesia, we went and visited the Cobra King, and so they had all snakes there, and they were killing snakes and grilling them up, and they were squirting or draining all the blood of the dead snakes into bottles. People were coming in and buying it, and I asked one guy, he was a soldier in Indonesia, and he just said, it helps me with my back pain. If I have a shot of this, I'm fine. And so people believe all sorts of strange and weird things in the world. But this Cartazono, it's quite amazing. So this is related to the Carcadon. There you go. Let's just look at this Wikipedia article on the Carcadon. Okay, so this is in. That's Italian? Yeah, it is. It's in Italian. So let's just zoom it in a little bit. The Carcadon. Look, they're saying it's probably an Indian rhinoceros. How's that? It's just quite amazing. Look, rhinocerotoni, elephanti, e unicorni. So it's saying it's a unicorn, it's a rhinoceros, and so there we go. Quite amazing. Let's just keep going down. So they're calling this animal a unicorn. Nice picture there. That's weird. That doesn't make much sense to me. Okay. Rhinoceros. Rhinoceros Center. Rhino Resource Center. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I think that's got the picture that I was showing you. So this is a whole thing about rhinos. Wow. So let's just go to unicornium, monocerotis, unicornium. So this is the thing. If you look through old literature, monoceros, the Greek, unicornium or unicornus or whatever in the Latin, and then in the English it's just unicorn. And they're all synonymous. And many times a rhinoceros would be called a unicorn because it has one horn. So yeah, that's 1551. Very interesting. Oh yeah, and here right at the top, let's have a look at because that's the picture actually. It has rhinoceros elephanto. Let's just grab that and throw it into translate. Rhinoceros is like an elephant. It has a horn in its nose, hence its name, Dion. That's different. Dion, yeah. Its name is Dion. Now, I've never realized that Dion etymology. I know I'm going on a bit of a wild goose chase here, but dictionary. The mother of hermaphrodite. Ancient Greek, Dion. Anyway, that is a rabbit trail in itself. For a single horn protrudes from the top of his nose, and we shall say more in the future. And although certain other animals are seen with horns, such as the Aurochs, the Anga, the Indian ass of others, however, in the middle of the fort. So I think that's exactly the same as what we're reading through before. Okay, yeah, he's talking about Pliny and others. So interesting. It does seem that people in England did know what these things were. Fuller on unicorns' horns, the history of the worthies in England. So he's talking about all sorts of things, and rhinoceroses there, and the history of four-footed beasts. Edward Topsell. And so, okay, so he's saying 1625. So is that, just after did he write this just after the King James Version, or what happened here? When exactly is this? So let's grab that page, make it open. This is why you end up with 40 tabs open, because you just open the whole lot and you want to reference it, you want to copy it, you want to go through it, and then you haven't got time and you shut it all down and you reopen it. And okay, so that's opening. It's taking a little while. The Indian ass, yeah, very interesting. So yeah, this Rhino Resource Center looks pretty cool. Looks like it's got a bunch of stuff on rhinos. Rhino images. Wow. Look at that. Indian rhinoceros. So that's the one that a lot of people say that it could be, and I'm like, okay, well, it could be that. And but yeah, I guess I'm open to it being, something else, something that's extinct. I'm open to that. But definitely, just going through TurritinFan's material, it's just like, I don't know, he just seems to be only just pushing for this mythical thing. Just me searching around for just 10, 20 minutes, just you're following a few links that he's even got there, just going through and grabbing a few key terms. I've found all this other stuff that basically is going absolutely against what he's trying to show here, that the King James translators sort of only knew of the mythical type of thing, or that's what everyone thought it was. And so
now, the people of the late Middle Ages and early Reformation period didn't necessarily think of it as mythical. And John Calvin, obviously he didn't read the King James Version, but he did read Latin, and he didn't write his commentaries in English. But in his commentary on Psalm 29, 5-8, he says, talking about the phrase like a unicorn, he says, which we know is one of the swiftest animals. And of course, this it better fits with the idea of a legendary beast than with the lumbering rhino. Although rhinos can go dangerously fast for humans, they're not known as one of the fastest or swiftest animals.
I would tend to disagree. Okay, so let's have a look at rhino. Rhinoceros running. I've heard they can go up to 60 kilometers an hour. Okay, so I'm not sure if this is copyrighted. Just got to check and see if it's copyrighted, because then they send you a thing and you have to take your video down, which is not fun. Okay, so I don't think there's any. It doesn't look copyrighted. Goes for 10 seconds. All right. That's a waste of time. Yeah, I'm just wondering if this is copyrighted too. See, sometimes it's not even the people who make the clip that send you the copyright information. And it's just, it hits some algorithm. Maybe if I show it like fast, that might jump. I'm sure they have a thing, but that'll make him go faster. 1.25. Okay.
Meaning two horn in Latin and Greek.
Two horn, not one horn. Okay, so it's not the same, but it is a
solitary
rhino.
And shy animals by nature that some believe has healing and grasses and thorns.
Okay, so I'm better off, rather than risk this copyright thing, I'm just going to go to rhinoceros running speed. Okay, rhinoceros running speed, white rhinoceros 50 k's an hour, Indian rhinoceros 55 k's an hour, black rhinoceros 55 k's. That's pretty fast. If you're heading down the road doing, here we go by kilometers. So if you're heading down the road doing 60, and that's motoring, that's pretty fast. And so if you hit someone going that fast, you probably kill them. How quick can a rhino run? Up to 50 k's will, which makes them the fastest land animal, heavier than 1,000 kg. Hippos take second place. They can go pretty fast too. So this is the thing. I think that TurritinFan just has a mindset about the rhinos that, probably, National Geographic and all the rest of it. But clearly these animals do run, do they can do that. And so in his article here, he's basically said John Calvin, he didn't read the King James Version. He did not write commentaries in English, but his commentary on Psalm 29, 5-80 explains, like a unicorn, which we know is one of the swiftest animals. So I mean, something that can run. I mean, let's just look at how fast, say, a dog can run. Okay, dog running speed. It can run as fast as a German Shepherd. I mean, it mightn't be like a greyhound race, but I mean, they were like 55, nearly 60, yeah, between 50 and 60 sort of thing. I mean, you're looking, I mean, have you ever been to the greyhounds and seen them run around? And a German Shepherd running as fast as it can. So 15 of the fastest dog breeds in the world. Okay. Border Collie, 30. I mean, Border Collie can run fast, man. The Barozzi Dalmatian, 37. Rhino can run faster than all these. German Shepherd, 30. Great Dane, 30. Oh, this is miles an hour. Okay, so that's different. Yep. Okay, my mistake. But you're looking at 30. So you're looking at about the same as, I mean, 45, obviously that's going to run a lot quicker. Now, I need it in kilometers because we're doing it. Yeah, that was in kilometers there. But yeah, I think you get my drift. This is, I just think that TurritinFan again is reading into Calvin's notes, saying, oh, it's one of the swiftest animals. This seems to describe better the legendary beast than the lumbering rhino. It's like a rhino can't run. And so when it was like, yeah, a rhino can leap and jump up, or in the King James, it actually says skip. When showed footage of a baby rhino doing that, it's like, well, it's not good enough. This sort of thing. It's like, to me, it's just a bias against that. You've just decided that you don't like this reading. You think rhino is wrong. You think, unicorn and rhino being sort of like synonymous there, that's wrong. And the thing is, too, it's I'm open to it being an Indian rhinoceros. I mean, to me, that would all fit. But I'm also open to it being some other animal very similar to that that's gone extinct, as we've looked before. Okay.
Likewise, if you look at Thomas Watson's Body of Divinity, you can see that he discusses it as though it is a mythical beast. Well, he's not exegeting a specific text, but you'll notice he uses it in an analogy. He says, when the dragon has poisoned the water, the unicorn with his horn extracts and draws out the poison. So Jesus Christ has drawn out the poison of every affliction, have injured the saints. So he makes this beautiful metaphor. But again, it shows that his understanding of unicorn was this magical, mythical beast.
So notice he's saying, because, again, how come people today are killing rhinos for their horns, for their healing medicinal abilities, which is probably all rubbish. But why are you always just saying, well, that must be a horse with a narwhal tusk or narwhal horn? So basically, it's like, Thomas Watson's Body of Divinity treats the word unicorn as referring to the mythical beast, not in exegeting a text, but in the use of the analogy. So listen to this. When the dragon had poisoned the water, the unicorn with its horn extracts and draws out the poison. So Jesus Christ. So I would say that that's the mythical thing, but it doesn't describe it. It's not. You're still reading into that either way. If I said, okay, it's a rhino, goes up and puts his horn there, and that's a picture of Jesus. Now, to me, half of this stuff would be mythical. But I just, that's probably not a strong example of me showing that. But I just feel that the Calvin example is just like, well, you're just reading into that. It is a swift animal. You're saying that it's not. It is a very swift animal. It can run as fast as your dog. Okay, let's continue.
Not a rhinoceros. John Flavel similarly talks about the supposedly medicinal horn. He says there's as much difference betwixt the death to the people of God and others as betwixt the unicorn's horn, when it is upon the head of the fierce beast, and when it is in the apothecary's shop, where it is made salubrious and medicinal.
Okay, so there is as much difference betwixt the death to the people of God and others as betwixt the unicorn's horn, when it is upon the head of the fiercest beast, and when it is in the apothecary's shops, where it is made salubrious and medicinal. Okay, they still do that today with the rhinos.
And unfortunately, as you can imagine, in the mid and late 1600s, there were people selling unicorn horn in apothecary shops, even though, in fact, there weren't any unicorns.
Okay. So what are they selling today? Okay, so when you kill a rhinoceros on the black market, you want to sell this stuff to some Chinese guy. What are they? Is that all mythical? I just don't understand why everything that has to do with the horn and medicine is only related to that, when clearly we can see many other parts of literature that would say a rhinoceros's horns were sought after as well. So to me, you're just reading that into everything. Now, sometimes you might be reading it correctly, but I think that you're just reading it into absolutely everything and just overlooking the fact that it could be talking about something else, especially like, say, with Calvin.
So what did the well-educated King James translators mean by unicorn? Well, it appears that they did mean basically what we think of when we see the word unicorn. That was the established meaning of the word in 1611. Now, Nick Sayers, in our debate, just suggested that unicorn was an umbrella term that at the time broadly encompassed a rhinoceros. His evidence mentioned during the debate was a linked definition on his webpage. And I've looked at that linked definition. The linked definition points us to volume 11 of the Oxford English Dictionary of 1913.
So it's just 1913. But the thing is, if you understand how the Oxford English Dictionary was compiled, they went back and looked at the usage of terms right back to Old English, and show Old English, Middle English, and Modern English, and show the usage of it. And they'll have, if it's had 10 different definitions, they'll show all 10. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the first one, second. It can be like the ninth one, and that relates to what you're talking about. And so, okay, so let's continue.
That dictionary, however, does not support Nick's position.
So this is what amazes me. It doesn't support what I'm saying. And so I'll let him go through this, but I'll just show you. I'll read through the Oxford, and then I'm probably going to shut it down maybe at about 3 hours, because it is getting a little bit late here. But I'll go through the Oxford and maybe a few others, but we'll just see if TurritinFan is just not wanting to see the evidence. So let's have a look.
First, the dictionary explicitly says that the term refers to the fabulous or legendary creature, which it says was the monoceros.
But the monoceros was also a real creature that people were talking about and saying this is a real creature. So when we read Pliny, now I was going to read Pliny before, but I didn't. Let's have a look here. But Pliny said an exceeding wild beast called a monoceros, one-horned. It made a deep lowing noise, and one black horn, 2 cubits long, projects from the middle of its forehead. This animal, they say, cannot be taken alive. So this is Pliny the Elder. Many times we're looking at different things that come from Pliny. He's actually a really interesting early church writer. Excuse me. And so clearly, Pliny is talking, he's describing like a rhinoceros, or he's at least describing what would be this thing, a cargadon, which most people are saying is pretty much an Indian rhinoceros. I would say there is a bit of a difference, but perhaps they didn't see it closely. So this one's got the horn right at the top of the head. Some have it in the middle of the head. So that would be an interesting study to do. Okay. And I guess, myself saying in the debate, it's like a nose, sort of focused on the nose thing. You're looking more at the word horn. I should have probably emphasized more of just horn rather than nose, because people are like, well, the horn is on the nose, or it's in the middle of the forehead, or it's at the top of the forehead, and so that makes a difference, obviously, when you're looking at all these different ones and how they're described. But let's just go back to the video.
Of the ancients. The dictionary then goes on to say the unicorn has at various times been identified or confused with the rhinoceros, with various species of antelope, or with other animals having a horn or horns, or horn-like projection from the head. Okay,
so that's pretty clear. The unicorn has at various times been identified or confused, so both identified or confused with the rhinoceros, and various species of antelope, or with other animals having a horn or horns or horn-like projection from the head. So people say, "Oh, that's a rhinoceros," when it's not. It's something different, or the unicorn. So this is specifically talking about the definition of unicorn. So it has at various times been identified and confused, and it's been identified with the rhinoceros. So that's exactly what I was saying. So the ultimate English dictionary, the Oxford English Dictionary. So that probably, if I was to do, a show of hands in scholarship and say which is the best dictionary to go to for English words, I mean, Oxford English Dictionary, like hands down, is especially the older. I like the older ones. I don't like the new stuff. And so anyway, to me, that just clears up everything, because he's saying that the people of 1611 don't know that that all they know is a unicorn and it's a horse with a big horn. Okay, the mythical creature. But clearly, it's saying it has at various times been identified with the rhinoceros. Okay, and also confused with the rhinoceros, and confused and identified with antelope and other, so sometimes it's confused, sometimes it's like, okay, they're specifically saying that it is. Let's just continue.
Nick also offered a linked definition of rhinoceros, which doesn't seem to be particularly relevant, except to confirm that the mention of rhinoceros is talking about the same thing that we call a rhinoceros now. So that was Nick's argument. Nick also pointed to Cole's 1717 dictionary definition of unicornus, which is an adjective that means of one horn. I looked to see if there was any usage of this term unicornus in the 1600s. I did find that Sir Thomas Browne in 1646 used it to reference a kind of beetle, a group of beetles or species of beetles that were unicornus beetles. Even there, however, Sir Thomas seems to recognize that there's a clear distinction between the unicorn and the rhinoceros.
So even there, however, Sir Thomas seems to recognize there is a clear distinction between the unicorn and the rhinoceros. Why? Let's have a look.
But we can consider that perhaps further. That's a scientific term, and not that long after 1611. But even there, there's a clear definition. The first dictionary definition of unicornus that I could find says, "That hath but one horn, as the beast called unicorn is said to have." That's Thomas Blount's dictionary from 1661. In short, while the term unicornus may mean one-horned, even in the 1600s, the term unicorn still referred to the mythical beast rather than being an umbrella term.
Okay, so in short, while the term unicornus may mean one-horned, so it's still talking about the mythical beast. Okay, so even though we're going to go, I'll go back through Oxford and look at the other things that I brought up just in passing. These other references that I'm yet to throw on my website, but this one here, Fuller on unicorn horns, 1662. The Middle English work here, A History of Four-Footed Beasts. Wow, it goes through a lot of stuff here. That would be an interesting one to go through, actually. That's huge. The horn of a unicorn and the rhinoceros. So yeah, we're looking at the one-horned animal, rhinoceros. And so I've just got to find the date for this book, actually. It's got the date for everything else but the book. Maybe if I search for that, it'll come up on Google or something. Have a date. Here we go. You can buy it in Amazon. That'll might give a bit of info. Doesn't say. Catalog. That should show it. $16.58. Okay, that's interesting. But is that just that printed edition of it? Because the guy died apparently in 1625. Anyway, I'm spending too much time on that. Let's just let TurritinFan chat for a little bit, and then we'll go to the Oxford.
Nick further referred to Webster's 1828 dictionary definition of unicorn, and that great American dictionary does say an animal with one horn, the monoceros. This name is often applied to the rhinoceros. Nick does not cite, but perhaps should have done so to prove his point, the entry on rhinoceros, which says a genus of quadrupeds of two species, one of which, the unicorn, has a single horn growing almost erect from the nose. I think it may say has rather than as, another typo I may want to correct. This animal, when full grown, is said to be 12 feet in length. There's another species with two horns, the bicornus. They're natives of Asia and Africa. So the 1828 Webster's does seem to use them somewhat interchangeably, but of course that's 2 centuries later than the 1600s.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, we have the older usage of the Middle English, and then we have dictionaries explaining this phenomenon. You can see why I'm not making this up, in other words. And as we read through the Oxford, you'll just go, yeah, why didn't he see that?
And while applied to the rhinoceros, it's only relevant when there's distinguishing two different types of rhinoceros. There's the unicorn rhinoceros and the bicorn rhinoceros, two-horned. Nick noted that Aristotle wrote of a horse-like creature in India with a horn on its forehead, and that Pliny the Elder described a beast with a large horn on its forehead. Nick said those are correct definitions, but they do seem to refer to the same fate.
Okay, so I'm just going to go back a little bit.
So the 1828 Webster's does seem to use them.
Okay, so Nick further noted that Aristotle wrote of a horse-like creature in India with a horn on its forehead, and Pliny the Elder described a beast with a large horn on its forehead. Nick placed these under correct definition category, although they seem to
somewhat interchangeably, but of course that's 2 centuries later than the 1600s. And while applied to the rhinoceros, is only relevant when there's distinguishing 2 different types of rhinoceros. There's the unicorn rhinoceros and the bicorn rhinoceros, 2-horned. Nick noted that Aristotle wrote of a horse-like creature in India with a horn on its forehead, and that Pliny the Elder described a beast with a large horn on its forehead. Nick said those are correct definitions, but they do seem to refer to the same fabled beasts. They don't refer to a rhinoceros, which of course doesn't have a horn on its forehead. Everyone who's seen rhinoceroses knows that they have them.
So Nick placed these under correct definitions. They seem to refer to the same fabled beasts. So I've read, I'll just read through Aristotle and Pliny. We'll just have another look at them. And you tell me, okay, Pliny. An exceedingly wild beast called the rhinoceros, one-horned. Okay, so it's got one horn. I mean, to me, that's like, okay, so but apparently this is mythical. This is like the white horse with a narwhal sort of horn. It makes a deep lowing noise. So it's not like like a horse. It's like something else. I don't want to do impersonations of animals. And one black horn, 2 cubits long, proceeds from the middle of its forehead. A black horn, like 2 cubits long. This animal, they say, cannot be taken alive. Aristotle, I've found that wild asses as large as horses are to be found in India. It has a horn on the brow about 1.5 cubits length. So where is this explaining the mythical creature? Where is this explaining the mythical creature? You know what I mean? He's reading into these. And then once he's read into them, he all the way along, he's like, no, well, I think it's talking about the other one. I think it's talking about the mythical one. And so all the way through, he's stacking up evidence for his case, which is not really making a case whatsoever. I mean, look, even the treasury scripture knowledge, the Reem is most probably denotes the rhinoceros. It's just, I mean, treasury of scripture knowledge isn't something I would even. Yeah, I would say it's got modern version influence in it and all the rest of it, but they're just like Serrano. That's why I can't understand why TurritinFan's doing this. It's like, anyway, we'll go a little bit further and then I'll hit the Oxford. Let's just go a bit further.
If at all, on their nose. Or halfway up between, the second horn is sometimes closer to their eyes, but they have a nose horn. That's why they're called rhinoceros. And while the King James translators, I said no, I have the wrong spelling of no here. So many typos, I need to fix this. While the King James translators had no knowledge of 1800s Americans, they had some familiarity with Aristotle and Pliny the Elder. So
he's saying because Aristotle and Pliny the Elder were clearly talking about a mythical creature, that's what the King James translators knew. You're just reading into this. It's just, I mean, it's actually really tiring to go through this because it's sort of like, it's like saying, about certain bears, like you have polar bears, you've got black bears, brown bears, and it's like someone, like say David Attenborough, he didn't know about polar bears, and it's like, how do you explain to someone that he does know about polar bears? Oh no, he's talking about something else. He was talking about penguins. Really? Or it's a mythical bear. He's talking about Sasquatch. Really? And you just read into it, and it's like, no, you clearly can see a bear there, and yeah, some people do talk about Sasquatch, but that's different context. And I just can't see what he's saying here. It's just not. He's just pushing only for this, or basically he's just pushing that the King James translators didn't know that it was related to a rhinoceros when clearly they say it in their margin. It's like, I mean, I'm absolutely sort of dumbfounded. That's why all through this, I'm sort of like, I don't know what to say. How can you not see this? A unicorn, they've got in the margin, or rhinoceros. And it's like, it's probably a rhinoceros, but he's like, no, they only knew of the mythical creature, a unicorn. That's what they meant. And it's like, okay.
There's more, though. Nick cited the Treasury of Scripture Knowledge, which says the Reem is most probably a rhinoceros, and Jameson, Fawcett, Brown, who apparently say that Reem means rhinoceros. While I ultimately disagree about that point, key to our discussion is the fact that the King James Version says unicorn rather than saying rhinoceros.
But the marginal note says that's what it means. That's what it is. That's what it's like. So that's the thing. You have to define what the marginal notes mean. And so we do, that sort of does happen a little bit later. I sort of want to get to a bit of a closing point so I can go back to the Oxford and have a look, and we'll close on that. But
I also compare the JFB commentary on Psalm 22, which at verse 21 says, deliverance pleaded in a view of former help when in the most imminent danger from the most powerful enemy, represented by the unicorn or wild buffalo. The wild buffalo would be something quite similar to wild ox, wild bull, or ox. Finally,
of course, some people are going to side with modern definitions of the wild bull thing, but clearly Treasury of Scripture Knowledge says that the Reem is most probably a rhino. Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown, they say Reem means rhinoceros. I mean, that's quite a lot of weight on our side, But then it's like, while I ultimately disagree with that point, key to our discussion is the fact that the King James Version says unicorn rather than rhinoceros. It's like, yeah, but the footnote says or rhinoceros. So obviously I know I can't even describe. If you can't see the forest through the trees, it's sort of like, how do you describe it? Let's just continue and we'll try to wrap it up.
Under his correct definitions, Nick cites Wesley's notes on Numbers 23-22, where Wesley apparently wrote, in unicorn, the word may mean either a rhinoceros or a strong and fierce kind of wild goat. But such a creature as an unicorn, as commonly painted, has no existence in nature. Wesley's right about the last part, of course. And if he means that the unicorn...
So here's Wesley. See, this is the thing about usage and dictionaries. Here's Wesley, 1703 to 1791. So you're looking at 100, maybe 130, 150 years after the translation. And he's basically saying a unicorn, it means a rhinoceros, or it could be some sort of weird, sort of wild goat. But such a creature as a unicorn is commonly painted. So he's saying there is a clear difference between that and the mythical thing. So this is quite common knowledge. Wesley was a prolific preacher in England, and so he would have been preaching around and said that this would have been a common sort of understanding. It probably means not that the English word unicorn means a rhinoceros or wild goat, but that the Hebrew word translated as unicorn has such a meaning. No, he's clearly talking about a unicorn. Well, I would say it's both, because it is the translation of a reem. It's a unicorn, and the word may mean a rhinoceros. So,
or the word in English means those things. He would be mistaken, of course, if he means that that's what the translators meant. But if he means that the original Hebrew word means those things, his answer is much better than the answer that was provided, or than the meaning that was actually intended by the King James translators. Nick also mentioned a number of definitions that Nick says are incorrect. I don't see how they help his position. I noted some of them on here. He mentions Wesley notes. before I get there, I note that Wesley's note at Job 39, 9 through 10 says, it's disputed whether this is a rhinoceros or some kind of wild bull. And that is a more, I think wild bull or bison or buffalo, something like that, is much more like what the Bible's describing. Nick disagrees with D.A. Waite, who says that it's probably the great aurochs or wild bulls, which are now extinct. I do find that interesting. I know D.A. Waite's often identified as being quote-unquote King James only, and yet he seems to be in agreement on this point. I suppose that D.A. Waite's solution is just to say that unicorn in English means those things. It didn't mean that to the King James translators, but if you do put an asterisk next to the word and say great aurochs or wild bulls, which are now extinct, you've corrected and improved the King James Version on that point. So perhaps that's what D.A. Waite.
So you've improved it because the King James translators only knew of a mythical creature. Even though they put in their margin or rhinoceros, they didn't know about a different unicorn. This is just not, it's just not logical. It's so illogical.
It was doing, trying to improve the King James Version, and if so, it sounds like he was successful on that point. The Trinitarian Bible Society seems to agree. They've identified unicorn as wild bull. Strong's Concordance says the same thing. Smith's Bible Dictionary says wild ox. And no one-horned animal is correct. So in other words, there's also, not only do they say that it is a wild ox, but also that there's no possibility that it's a one-horned animal. The Easton's Bible Dictionary says roughly the same thing. And Torrey's topical textbook, interestingly, says generally had a single horn, which seems to suggest that it could be a rhino, but I don't think Torrey's topical textbook is a great source. Philip Capusta's King James Dictionary defines unicorn as wild ox, which is an improvement, although it's not what the King James translators meant. And like I said, while I find a lot of the later explanations persuasive, such as those that say it refers to a wild ox, that's not what the King James translators meant when they wrote it. And the King James would be improved by just striking out the word unicorn and replacing it with something like wild bull or wild ox, or even aurochs, or even just transliterating and putting the Hebrew word reem, and then putting a note saying what we think the reem is, rather than putting in unicorn where it's not correct. So what about rhinoceros as a meaning for...
Okay, so I'm just going to jump back a little bit there.
And no one-horned animal is correct. So in other words, there's also, not only do they say that it...
Okay, so he says, I could go on, but there are numerous definitions of the Hebrew word or late explanations of the King James word as wild ox or the like. A few sources that seem to suggest rhinoceros seem to be offering an alternative to the obvious meaning of the literal text. While I find a lot of these later explanations persuasive, they do not seem to address the issue of the usage in the early 1600s when the King James was written. When the King James was written, unicorn meant the kind of unicorn illustrated above. So that's his main thing he's trying to get at here. Okay, so that's what they knew. That's what they meant. That's the first key thing he's trying to say is the King James guys, when they thought of unicorn, they thought of that mythical creature. And that's really all they thought of, even though they put rhinoceros in the margin. Sorry. But he does go that in his next point, which I'll probably start with in my next video. So that was the usual meaning, as illustrated by the writings of the folks from that era, including Shakespeare himself, which when we looked at, it could have referred to anything. For additional reading, here's a list of modern English dictionaries, and so you can look at modern dictionaries, and they're all like following, biblical scholarship, which is, pretty lousy. So anyway, that's it for the video section. So I'll quickly jump to what I have in my links here. So yeah, unicorn. Let's open that up. Actually, I think I've already got it open. Yes, I do. So it doesn't have to. So these can take a while to load up. Unicorn, that's great. Let's make that larger. So let's see if what I'm saying is silly. This is the premier dictionary, which I would say to go to. D.A. Waite says to go to. Many others. Even Mark Ward is like, go to the Oxford, and it's like as if it's a profound thing that he's the guy saying that. It's like, yeah, pretty much everyone's saying that, Mark, but you can sort of state the obvious and claim that you're the one who made it up, whatever. Unicorn. Okay, so different types of spelling, unicorn, etc. Anglo-French, Old French, modern French, unicorns, Spanish unicorno, Italian unicorno. That's the thing. We haven't even started to go through other language editions, or directly from their source Latin, unicorn, unicornus, having one horn. So basically it's unicorn, it's a Latin word. It spreads out into all the Romance languages. It spreads out into the Germanic, Anglo-Saxon as well. Uni and cornu, horn. So one horn. Very basic. It's like unicorn. The word was corrupted in Old French, and they have licorn, the usual form of in modern French, lincorn, etc. And so I did see that mention. Okay, so that's just a warm-up. The unicorn has at various times been identified or confused with the rhinoceros. The first thing it says is it's identified or confused with a rhino. These things are synonymous. So people are like, oh, what do you call that? Oh, it's a rhino. I think it's a unicorn, or they're confused with it, or they're accurately saying, yes, this is a rhinoceros, this is a unicorn. So why is TurritinFan missing this? I closed his video actually, so that's probably a good thing. But let's look. So he did read through this. The antelope. So with the various species of antelope, or with other animals having a horn or horns or horn-like projection from the head. According to Pliny, Natural History, it had a body resembling that of a horse, the head of a deer, and the feet of an elephant, and a tail as a lion, with one black horn projecting 2 cubits from the middle of its forehead. The horn of this animal was reputed to possess medicinal or magical properties, especially as an antidote or preventative of poison. See unicorn's horn. Okay, so that's one of the next definitions. Unicorn's horn here, which if we go down, maybe shell, maybe it's at the top. Should have that. Cornus having one horn. Unicornus beetles. Okay, here we are. Unicorn horn. A horn regarded as or alleged to be obtained from the legendary unicorn, but in reality that of the rhinoceros. Just narwhal or another animal frequently mounted, made into a drinking cup and employed as a preventative or charm against poison. So there you go. They're saying it's, oh, is that a unicorn's horn? Yeah, where'd you get that from? From a rhino. Oh, so that means a rhino and a unicorn are the same thing? Yeah. I mean, I just, for the life of me, I can't see how he can't see this. Okay, so let's go back to the unicorn. So we just diverted because it had unicorns. It had sea unicorn horn, and so we went there. Okay, here it has unicorn's horn. Okay, so it has 1385 or something. The unicorn, the lion. Oh, sorry, wolf, other lion, other unicorn. So Zit thou shalt have 600 rhinoceros, 200 unicorns, and 200 unicorns. So these are written together. It's amazing. Of here, the unicorn. Unicornus, Latin rhinoceros. How's that? Herdib, also unicorns, Latin rhinoceros, camels, pards. So they're saying unicorns is from Latin rhinoceros. 3 unicorns with lions, Sleeth, the unicorns with subcleans. It's hard to read all this, but I know it's probably really impossible to listen to this, but I'm just going to go through this video and I'm just going to show you this is the sort of thing that I'm coming up against. A proud rebellious unicorn defies the unicorn whose horn is worth half a city. That's pretty expensive. It's 1609. See, this is the thing. This is the usage that TurritinFan needs to look at and think about and go, okay, well, they're using that as, you know, a synonym for rhino and all this sort of stuff. Job, what's that? 39.9, is it? I think so. This is a unicorn, very fierce, strong creature it is. It nowadays very rare and anciently more common, and then it goes into some of the modern definitions. Okay, see, but the thing is, you read through that, so that in itself would go, okay, rhino, unicorn, synonymous. You know, they're sometimes mistaken for one another. It's related to monoceros. Monoceros isn't just this mythical creature. Sometimes it's a mythical creature. Look, it says a fabulously legendary animal, usually regarded as having the body of a horse with a single horn projecting for its forehead. Then it has the semicolon, the monoceros of the ancients. So that is, it's not saying that the monoceros of the ancients is this. So it's like, it's a full stop, but it's the semicolon is just a little bit weaker than the full stop, okay, because it's including this. So then straight away it's saying it's related to the rhinoceros. But even if you disagree with that definition, it could be the second definition, used in Middle English versions of the Old Testament to refer to the Vulgate unicornus or rhinoceros. So saying unicornus, rhinoceros, Greek monokoros are all unicorn. That's what they mean, the same thing. As translations of the Hebrew Reem, also R-E-Y-M, that's interesting. Rim. I'll have to check the difference between them because I know Rim is an Arabic word for a certain animal, and retained in various latter revisions, but translated by Wild Ox in the Revised Bible. So obviously Westcott and Hort. So the Psalter has the mouth of lions from the horns of the unicorns. And notice that's in 1300 in the Psalter. Horns of the unicorns is plural there. Horns of the unicorns. Also in versions from 1340 to 1611. That's interesting. 1340. I wonder what that is. You know, which version is that? I know Wycliffe. Whose strength is as a unicorn. The Psalms are 1580. Sydney. The unicorns come near me, etc. So they're saying that this is equivalent to the unicornus, to the rhinoceros, and to the monoceros. Okay. And so that's the second definition, or the second reference made. So the first reference made is what you read initially, and then this is B. Okay. Now C, in figurative or elusive use. So we have James of Scotland, where can show the unicorn, the only unicorn of the muses. So it's sort of like a figurative type of term. Bridle the unicorn of your impatience. So I guess it's like, you're saying you're as crazy as a cat, or you're like a cut snake or something. It's not directly to do with it. So D, unicorn, like an ornament. So I guess you got the horn, which is the unicorn, the mythical type of thing. So number 2, a figure picture representation of this animal. The royal arms of Great Britain and Scotland, the mythical type of thing. You got heaps of definitions here. A Scottish coin was called the unicorn. A carriage drawn by 3 horses, 2 abreast, 1 leader. So it was called unicorn. Oh, look at this one. The one-horned rhinoceros, obsolete. Okay. And so in 1398, it talks about that land in Ethiopia and the rhinoceros, but is the unicorn the beast with 1 horn? So that's what I was reading earlier. Actually, I don't think it's on this page. And now I've lost it. Where was I? Here. No. Here. So that was that one that I found earlier and that I was reading. So maybe I could find that. Yeah, which is not that one. But this one. The Indian asses. I'm pretty sure it's that one. Oh, no, it was the one I copied onto my webpage. So anyway, I copied on my webpage, and I just found that just sort of surfing around. And it basically says a rhino is a unicorn. So here we have the definition of number 7. 6. Number 7 is the one-horned rhinoceros, and they're saying this is obsolete today. And so I went to see the rhinoceros or unicorn, being the first that I suppose was ever brought to England. So this is in that 1584. I'm pretty sure that's the document that I was reading earlier. There you go. So I would say, beside even what we looked at before, this is a very, very strong indication that it is an obsolete term, that the one-horned rhinoceros is a synonym for unicorn. So sorry, TurritinFan, you are simply just not reading the Oxford English Dictionary properly. And I invite you to, say, contact someone like Mark Ward, who prides himself as working out all these old English words and looking at the Oxford and all the rest of it and teaching us all about, things that we already most of the time know. But ask him. So, Nick Sayers has said this. He's pointed out that it's an obsolete term. The one-horned rhinoceros is a meaning for unicorn. So a unicorn, to some people, they thought it was a one-horned rhinoceros. Okay, but let's not stop there. Let's keep going. Number 8 is the name of a fish, a shell having a projecting horn. or horn-like process. So this would prove that what I was saying about unicorn being an umbrella term for everything that has a one horn. That would prove that. Okay. So some people are saying regarded as resembling the fabulous unicorn or some of the respective rhinoceros 2 and 4. A few examples other than those illustrated here are recorded in American diets from 1891 onwards. The narwhal that was known as the sea unicorn. Okay. Kinds of whales. Narwhal. Okay, so it's called narwhal. That's interesting. I wonder if it comes from a shortened form of unicorn, like knee whale, knee corn, knee whale, one whale sort of thing. Okay, a unicorn shell, azul, species having horn. There appear to be 3 existing species of rhinoceroses. That's in zoology. Sorry, I'm like Zool. I'm thinking, that wasn't that on Ghostbusters or something. That in India, a unicorn. That of the Cape, a bicorn. Okay, so sometimes they would mix up. It's like looks like a rhinoceros or whatever, but it's like, it's got 2 horns, but we still call it a rhino or whatever. Unicorn bone, horse, ivory crested, etc. Special combs, chiefly of animals. Excuse me. So anything representing the horn of a unicorn. So this is why I have that link, TurritinFan. I just can't see why you haven't read through this, Unicorn plant, unicorn shell, unicorn whale, whole bunch of other reasons. Unicorn, carbon, fashion, and then we move on to other words. So this is a completely different word. So I have 12 definitions of unicorn. Okay, and we see one of them is number 7, I think it was, the one-horned rhinoceros. There you go. So then we look at rhinoceros. Okay, so I'm pretty sure it starts here because he was saying I'm not sure why I need to put rhinoceros there. The only reason that I put it there was so that people could see that a rhinoceros was what I was talking about. Rhinoceros, you got a bunch of forms, late Latin rhinoceros, also medical and modern Latin rhinoceron, and in the genitive rhinocerontus, Greek rhinoceros, ris and seros, nose, horn. A large, unwieldy quadruped of it. See, the thing is, what he's not understanding how to read the Oxford English Dictionary. If you read through, this is number 1 definition, and then you read through number 2 definition, number 3 definition, and so obviously when we go back to here, one of the main definitions that we saw was the Vulgate's unicornus, rhinoceros, monocoros, translating as reem, and they've got a whole bunch of biblical things there. So they're saying that's part of that, but also this obsolete rendition here. So you can see that people were saying a unicorn and a rhinoceros are the same thing. And so sometimes you can have different definitions go side by side. So you can say, I'm just trying to think of an obsolete word that everyone knows. I guess the word gay comes to mind. in James, where it talks about gay clothing. We wouldn't think that is dressing up like someone who is representing the gay community. So we would say that word just means like fancy clothing of a rich person. So, but these definitions can go along side by side, and so you can have some, probably not so much nowadays because it's become such a huge issue, but probably 20, 30, probably more so 40, 50 years ago, that word could have been used, and also the other word was known to be used, and so sometimes they could have been interchangeable. It's like, well, I'm like that, so that's why I'm happy, or whatever, and so but yeah, so understanding and see, notice this is part 2. This is a 2 there, so I'm pretty sure there's a 1 there. Okay, so it's giving most of definitions. So number 2, a one-horn rhinoceros. So a word can, like, say the word grace, I think there's like 13 different definitions just in English. Or no, like 26 definitions, I think it is. But in Greek, there's so many different definitions. It can mean power. It can mean God's power. It can mean something that pays a debt. It can be something that gives the gifts of the Holy Spirit. There's so many different definitions for the word grace. And sometimes they can be in the same use together. So you have to understand that this usage can be in line with this usage, but definitely whichever usage you go with, clearly it's not just talking about a mythical creature. And so let's go back to rhino. So a large unwieldy animal. The chief of the one-horned species of the Indian rhinoceros are the Indian rhinoceros, Rhinoceros unicornis, of the Javan rhinoceros. So even that the scientific name is Rhinoceros unicornis, it does put these two terms together. In 13 something, it has another beast, also is that of the rhinoceros. Excuse me. I'm going to finish in a minute. Wild beast, rhinoceros. This rhinoceros has 2 horns, whereof the one is of notable bigness. So I guess, some of the rhinos, they have a big horn and a little one sort of up top. And okay, so a bunch of usage there for the rhinoceros. See, notice this one is called a Charontes. Elephants, rhinoceroses, tigers, leopards. So I'm just looking for any other place where it's sort of like a rhinoceros and a unicorn. Okay, so a large unwieldy person. So they came in like a roaring, like a rhino in a bull shop, in a china shop, or a bull in a china shop, sort of thing. Rhinoceros, beetle, or bird, obsolete. People don't use that anymore. A rhinoceros, bull calf, cow, horn hump, hunt, skin or spore, resembling that of a rhinoceros. Okay. Okay, so here we see rhinocerot, now rare. Rhinocerot, rhinoceros, see rhinocerota, rhinoceros. Rhinoceros's nose, We saw the whole skin of the young rhinoceros. Suicidally minded rhinoceros. The form rhinoceros, originally representing Latin rhinocerotes, from Greek rhinocerotes, serves as a plural for both rhinoceros and rhinocerot. Okay, it's interesting that it's plural. Okay, so that describes what a rhinoceros is. So obviously it's pretty specific. Rhinoplastic, which is to do with pertaining to plastic surgery, to do with your nose, rhinoscope. Okay, so that is the description of a rhinoceros. So the reason I've got that there is so then you can go back to here and look at number 7 and go the one-horned rhinoceros. So that's exactly what it's talking about here. You can look to see the unicorn is to render the unicornus or rhinoceros in the Bible. So this is why I can't understand why TurritinFan is like, I don't know why he's got these links here. They don't really say that much. What's the point, sort of thing? It's like just read through them. I've just spent maybe 30 minutes just reading through all these for you so that you can understand, and you can understand my frustration at looking at these points, say from your own website, where you're sort of saying that none of these things are relevant. So let's just go back up. True to words. So yeah, saying, John Calvin, when he has like a unicorn, which we know is one of the swiftest animals, it's like, no, that's that's describing a mythical creature. Why are you just saying that there? It's just you're just reading into that. And when I give you a really good proof of the Oxford English Dictionary, which most people would consider definitive, I'm not saying it's not imperfect. I've found errors in it. It's still, it can have problems. But here it's like it has so much detail that you're sort of left going, yeah, that's a good definition. Yep, it's talking about the Bible with rhinos and stuff like that, and that's what it means, and in those places. And then it's got the obsolete terminology of its an Indian rhinoceros, and so Nick in our recent debate suggested that unicorn was an umbrella term. At the time, that broadly encompassed rhinoceros. His evidence mentioned during the debate was linked to his website. Okay, so here's the link. The dictionary, however, does not support Nick's position. First, the dictionary explicitly says the term refers to the fabulous or legendary creature, which it says was rhinoceros of the ancients. I can understand that's what it says as you read through, but you've got to read the whole thing. You can't just pick the bit that fits with you and go, well, we're going to ignore everything else. That's not good scholarship. The dictionary then goes on to say the unicorn has at various times been identified or confused with the rhinoceros, with various species of antelope, etc. And it says Nick also offered a link to rhinoceros, which does not seem to be particularly relevant. It's because if you actually read through the unicorn one, then you'll go, oh, what's a rhinoceros? And you read through it, and it explains what a rhinoceros is. So when the King James translators have unicorn in their text, and then they have or rhinoceros, that's exactly what they're meaning and what they're saying. So I'm defining terms. This is like the first thing that you do whenever you're doing a study, you define terms. And so I've gone, okay, Oxford, you can't get much better than that. even if I was just to go to Webster's, that's exactly what he says too. It's like, it's not until modern Bibles just come and muddy the waters with this wild ox, Aurochs, or something, So it does not seem to be particularly relevant, except to confirm that the mention about the identification confusion with the rhinoceros is talking about the same thing we call rhinoceros now. Yeah, well, that's why I put it there. But so it's not really okay. So yeah, I'm citing all these other things. It's like, okay, and citing all the contras as well, because that's what I'm doing. But it just sort of leaves it like, why wouldn't you point out that point number 7 is talking about rhino. It has a rhinoceros when it's talking about all the biblical definitions. And so down here, used in Middle English versions of the Old Testament to render the Vulgate unicornus or rhinoceros, Greek monokeros for Reem, detaining various other versions. But then, later on it's translated as a wild ox, which is very silly. But yeah, you're reading through these and they're saying that this is unicornus, rhinoceros, monokeros. It means unicorn. And then you just jump over here and it's a one-horned rhinoceros, which would be, the equivalent to an Indian rhino or something very similar. I just, for the life of me, can't see how you can't see this unless you're just picking and choosing bits that you want to see. It's very clear. Now, it just says a fabulous and legendary animal usually regarded as having the body of a horse with a single horn projecting from its forehead, the rhinoceros of the ancients. Okay. And then it has unicorn. It has at various times been identified or confused with the rhinoceros. It's clearly, it's saying yes, both things. Yes, this is, we're not denying that there is a horse-like creature with a horn that people drew, but obviously the unicorn can be called that for that reason, or it can be called for a rhino, and Oxford English Dictionary proves it. My studies into the Middle English period prove that with the 1398 document that appears on my website here. This is the one that I was looking for earlier. With rhinoceron, the unicorn, a wild beast by kind and may be tamed in no wise. There have been many kinds of unicorn, for some being rhinoceron and some being monoceron and eglyceron. So, I mean, this is 1398. Anyway, I'm going to finish there. I'll just quickly go through some of the comments. Now, we had Rick Frias. He sort of jumped on and I was sort of interacting with him, but he seemed to just be quoting scripture that was unrelated, so I didn't really want to get too caught up in rabbit trailing. But then he started really listening to what I was saying. Yes, unicorn is treated as a figure of Christ. Yeah, and that's very cool. They are a parable that no one can comprehend. The behemoth and leviathan, that's what it signifies, I believe. When knowledge has no understanding, it is like an animal. Once you can tame the knowledge, it is no longer a misunderstood. The image, multi-headed sea serpent that is killed by God is given as food to the Hebrews in the wilderness. Okay, so it's pretty sort of strange stuff. The beast is considered that because of his non-understanding, I believe. So do you think unicorns were real? If you were listening, you would just sort of go, yeah. Besides dinosaurs, the bones would have been found, right? It all depends if they became fossilized. See? Okay, sorry, this is someone else. Behemoth has jumped on board, and he has the upside down cross and all that. And so I'm pretty sure he's like involved, thinks he's a Satanist or whatever. Do you think unicorns were real? Yes, absolutely. So besides dinosaurs, the bones would have been found, right? It all depends on if they became fossilized. Dinosaurs came first, yes, of course. Yeah, sometimes I forget that they're chatting together. We got to build a bone collector's tool. The metal detector gadget, I can't explain. They talk as if they were next to one. Do you believe this book? I think we have underground imaging technology. Unihorn meaning one horn. Unicorn is not a magical horse with a horn. The horn is a cup. And then Soupbone Jones says, TurritinFan is straining at a gnat and swallowing a unicorn. Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, thanks for joining us, guys. I know this hasn't been like my usual sort of thing where it's more interactive and it's a little bit more exciting. We're sort of just talking about one word, the definition of one word, really two words, unicorn and rhinoceros. But I think with the information that I've given you, you can clearly see why I'm a little bit frustrated with TurritinFan's definition of this. Now he's going into his second point in the video where he's talking about the King James and marginal no. So that's when we start getting a little bit more interesting. So, but with later foundation, and we're going to keep going through this, and hopefully this helps you, and this will show you and give you any ammunition against people who say unicorn is a mistranslation in the Bible or something like that. So you can clearly just turn around and say, no, it's a type of rhinoceros. Okay, well, God bless you guys. I'm going to bail, and thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.